The Idol Hero, Songstress. Chapter 8, Where Angels Fear to Tread. The only trigger warning for this chapter is canon typical violence, but of course, if anything is too much for you, feel free to skip the chapter or do whatever is necessary for yourself. I want to make sure everyone is safe. Real quick, before we start the chapter, I wanted to thank everyone so much. The channel just hit 200 subscribers. It's crazy to think about. We've been growing so fast. I'm really happy that you guys enjoy the stories as much as I do and keep coming back to watch and hang out. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into the chapter. I'll talk more at the end. The conversation he had with his friends weighed heavily on Izuku's mind throughout the rest of the night and on through the weekend. Second only to the special precautions he and his mother had to take as a direct result of the incidents at Aldera Middle and Elementary schools. Fearing reprisals from the former principal and vice principal of the middle school, as well as the principal of the elementary school, the Midoriyas were set up in a hotel across town by the trust fund which was funding the Greenettes' recovery from the bullying. It would only be for the night, though, as Namiri had indicated she had some place in mind for them to move on a more permanent basis. At first, both Midoriyas thought the heroes were being a tad bit paranoid, even for heroes, but as the R-rated hero had told them, there was a hint of a greater threat than just these administrators. Normally, finding civilians such as these should be child's play, especially with someone like Nezu on the case, but the trail to find them ran cold incredibly quickly, and the quirked animal was not one to leave things to chance. The chief of police, Surigame Kinji, agreed, and gave the Midoriyas a choice. They could accept hero protection or police protection. The now captured coach proved that the former Aldera student was a target, and would likely be for the foreseeable future. Therefore, it would be wise for the family to have some kind of protection, beyond that normally afforded to civilians. After all, they couldn't keep authorizing the song user to use his quirk without providing some kind of license, which would be impossible given that the teen wasn't even in high school yet, much less a hero student. That argument made the family of two cave. Where they would go would be a surprise, and they were to tell no one where they would be for the moment. Of course, those that knew they would be at the training camp during the weekend would know that part, but nothing else. Speaking of being in the know for the training camp, a last-minute decision was made by the heroes to include Sue in the training. Given she had been present at the counseling sessions all week, there was no real reason to exclude her. Plus, she was able to provide some rather insightful analysis into possible avenues of Izuku's quirk. So, the Frog Girl's parents were consulted, and in a rare convergence of fate, both parents would be home that weekend to take care of the younger Asui children, leaving Sue free from that responsibility. Thus, she had no reason to refuse. Not that she wouldn't have found a way to avoid refusing anyways. She had no rational reason for it, but she had found herself wanting to be around her new green-haired friend as much as possible. First was the fact that her friend obviously had some mental problems such as depression and social anxiety, and the circumstances of their meeting made her want to help him, if for no other reason than she felt not so much responsible for him, but more needed by him. Added to these concerns, she quite enjoyed learning about his quirk. It had to be the weirdest one she had ever heard of, and that didn't even take into account what it did to his normal physical body. In a way, he was a mutant like her, and she knew there was some common ground there, but these factors weren't all that kept her tied to him. No, what kept her attention was something undefined at this point in time, but tied her to him like the red string of fate. But she had to admit there were benefits to being Midoriya Izuku's friend, even despite depression and anxiety. And one of them was plainly obvious as she got out of the minivan at the Wild Wild Pussycats mountain base. She had long aspired to focus on rescue hero work herself, and this team was among the top of the charts in that category, only beat out by Selkie. If she were as much of a hero otaku as her friend, she'd be absolutely freaking out. But that didn't mean she wasn't wearing one of her rare wide smiles instead. As the Midoriya family, Tsu, and Midnight's family got out of the van, someone's throat clearing caught their attention. The moment they all turned towards the source of the noise, 4 people, one of them Tiger, began an introduction, assuming a group pose right out of a Sentai show. Lock on with these sparkling gazes. We've come to lend a paw to help. We have come from somewhere, stingingly cute and cat-like. Wild, wild pussycats. Wow, it's the Wild Wild Pussycats! They've been doing rescue work in the mountains for years, and have been credited with countless rescues, Izuku began, only to be cut off by a woman with blonde hair and a blue cat outfit. I think you're mistaken. I'm not that old. Tsu could tell he was intimidated by the woman, which got both Midnight's and Inko's hackles raised. Well, she didn't like it much either, and exposure to Tiger had curbed her inner fangirl to an extent. Just enough so she could use her tongue to slap the woman's wrist that was holding onto the boy's shirt. Midoriya has had a rough childhood, kiddo. Please refrain from threatening him outside of training. She didn't have the slightest idea why she did that, and when the woman turned to look at her, she thought she was about to pay big time for it, but a tired male voice broke in. She's right, he said after clearing his throat. While the problem child will have to learn to deal with threats, please do not traumatize the kid any more than necessary. The blonde woman looked between the green-haired girl and the black-haired hero, before truly taking a close look at the boy who was shrinking back under the attention. Oh shit, I'm sorry, she said, bowing at the waist toward the child. I'm afraid my age is a sensitive topic, but that does not excuse my lack of manners. I apologize. It's okay, the cringing boy stammered out. Tsu took a step closer and placed a hand on his shoulder, giving him a gentle squeeze and a ribbit. His head swung toward her for a moment, then sighed and relaxed a little more. Truly, it's alright, he said with a bit more surety. This interaction did not go unnoticed by either his mom nor his surrogate mom, who looked at each other, nodded, and filed it away for later. Well, the brown-haired woman sighed. Now that we got the traumatization requirement handled, we can get everyone moved in. I'm afraid we're in a bit of a rush, so please have your belongings put in your room, and be in the clearing in about half an hour. Tiger will show you all where you'll be sleeping. With that, the non-heroes were escorted to their rooms. Less than a half hour later, the 2 teens presented themselves in the clearing where the Pussycats, the other pro-heroes, Inko and Miyuki, were waiting. Miyuki was standing next to a table where an array of monitors was set up, with 2 large tower computers resting on a pad underneath. Several receiver units were behind the monitors, along with a pile of things that Tsu could only vaguely recognize. This is going to be so exciting, Miyuki squealed. It had been revealed during the week that Miyuki was an anime fan, especially of magical girls. To her, Izuku's Quirk was a dream come true. Mandalay gave a half-hearted eye roll as she stepped forward. Okay, so for today and most of tomorrow,
We'll be running you into the ground. In a few moments, Tiger will lead you both on a run, followed by calisthenics. A few kilometers for the run will do, and he will set individual goals for the rest. Excuse me, one sec.
Sue heard a barely audible groan coming from her freckled friend, but he had been doing this all week, so he was somewhat used to it. It is important, given your time limitations on your quirk, to get your body into peak physical condition, Eraserhead said sternly. So, a lot of your training will consist of that, and we'll expect you to do more work in the mornings. We'll be seeing what kind of shape your body will lend itself best to, and work to bring it to that. This includes developing weapon skills. Those will be doubly important given that some of your magical girl forms will require you to be proficient in weapons. Izuku obviously saw the logic in this as he nodded with determination, even as Pixie Bog picked up the details from there.
In addition, even before we start anything, you both will be equipped with various sensors so we can keep track of your quirk and energy usage. Well, I thank you for giving me some training as well, kiddo.
Sue spoke up.
Why am I being monitored for quirk usage?
Ragdoll, who had mostly been silent, provided the answer for this.
Well, I'm sure Midoriya-kun has dissected your quirk from here to Mustafu and back. The fact is that we're not sure what kind of frog you are part of. It may be you have abilities you don't even know of yet, and we can help you tap into them. So, while our primary focus is on Midoriya-kun, we're not going to be leaving you empty-handed. Okay, kiddo.
Pixie Bob nodded to Ragdoll's answer and added,
Ragdoll will be working mainly with Asui-chan this weekend. Meanwhile, after the warm-up exercise, we'll have Izuku transform into his most powerful magical girl form, and use that girl's powers on mud constructs to determine the maximum amount of power she can use. After the 10 minutes is up, we'll work on weapons training for a bit, followed by his second transformation, which should be his perceived weakest form. We'll have her run through some of those powers as well to compare. That will be for base reading. After that, dinner, followed by binge-watching the magical girl anime picked out by President Mike. Take notes.
Izuku nodded once in confirmation, then Pixie Bob added,
Tomorrow will be more of the physical and quirk use, but we'll be trying to see how many times in a day you can transform, and what, if anything, can help increase either duration or the number of times you can transform in a day. Okay, but there may be a problem with that plan,
the song user responded when he speaks.
Oh?
Mandalay said as she arched a brow.
What could be the problem? Stage fright? No, nothing like that,
he said while raising his hands forward and waving them to the side in a waving off gesture. The teen boy took a moment, then inhaled sharply before explaining.
I've been sticking to Sailor Moon characters because the other anime I know is too powerful and can come with some complications since equipment is also generated.
Oh, Miyuki spoke up from the table.
That's right. You told us the other library forms you had were too powerful for the building. I thought you were going to show us here what anime they came from.
She had stars in her eyes as she thought about which series he was hinting upon and hoping it would finally be divulged.
Pre-stage performer. Could you be overestimating the powers of those magical girls?
Present Mike spoke up from next to his manager, support technician. When the green-eyed boy shook his head frantically from side to side and paled, the rocker hero looked over to his assistant and considered her for a long moment. He didn't appear fully convinced, but knew that Izuku had a very good grasp on analysis. Then come over here and tell Miyuki-san what anime you're speaking of. Let her be your guide. Izuku nodded stiffly and marched over to the panda lady, then motioned her to bend down. When she did, the song gender-changing boy whispered into her ear for a good minute. The lady's eyes widened after the first few words, but her mouth hung open as the song user went on. When he was done, she looked at him in shock and nearly yelled, No! No, 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 no. You will not be using the second season of that anime. Absolutely not. Not until we're absolutely sure about the limitations of your quirk. Kiddo, Sailor Moon isn't exactly safe. What could be more dangerous than that? The frog girl asked, surprised. Trust me, you don't want to know, the song user replied with a pale face. I've been using Sailor Mercury for a reason. She's the weakest of the Sailor Scouts power-wise. And I don't know too many magical girl anime. I only know two, and one is extremely dangerous. At this point, Miyuki appeared to have made up her mind about something, and then said, His concerns are valid, and I would like for him to conduct his first quirk test first. We do not need to have an exhaustive as a factor for his ability to control his quirk. Mandalay stared at Miyuki for a moment, then looked at Eraserhead and Present Mike, who nodded firmly. Receiving their answers, she turned to Miyuki and gave a nod of affirmation that the order of the testing would be changed. After receiving the go-ahead, the magical girl enthusiast turned to the song talent and started her instructions. For these tests, it's better you stick to either the first and third seasons, or stick to Sailor Moon. Those would be safer. You'll have to train in that one eventually to make sure it's safe for you to use, for it will be just your luck that you'll need it, whatever it is, Ragdoll interjected. In the meantime, Asui-san, will you follow me? Asui reluctantly agreed and followed Ragdoll away. She's right, you know, Miyuki said thoughtfully. Eventually, you should know all the characters from that series. You can extrapolate the second season since the third season has them plus more. For now, though, I would stick to testing from the first and third seasons to avoid too many complications. But I don't want to even hear the first word from any song related to the second season escape your mouth. Understand? Is it truly that dangerous? Mandalay asked, concerned. Let's just put it this way. Right now, we've determined that his quirk will produce any artifact the target character has in her possession. That season in particular has an artifact that was world-ending in nature in the anime. Here, when we don't know how his powers generate them, or how much less power he has to work with, compared to the original characters, who knows? Everyone else in the clearing looked at the excitable woman and turned serious as if hoping she were joking. When she didn't show any evidence of a sense of humor on this topic, they turned to the quirk wielder and silently begged him to be kidding. But the look of anxiety on his face made it clear that not only was he not joking, but he was also taking everything Miyuki was saying to heart. The rest of the adults paled upon realizing this and fell momentarily silent. Right. Iko spoke up first, having figured out the anime in question and shuddered. No second season Midoriya-kun. Midoriya Izuku. Pixie Bob looked between the Quirk user and the analyst, cleared her throat of the anxiety she was now feeling, and asked,
Okay, now that you thoroughly managed to scare us all out of our wits, which series would provide the clearest indicators of available power limitations? In other words, which would give the better readings?
The Panda Lady and the singer both sighed as they looked at each other. They both suppressed a deep shudder as they realized they had little choice.
The one he hasn't been using. If you generate about a dozen of your toughest creatures as targets and allow me to get some base scans, then we'll be able to get accurate results. Thing is, we'll probably have to compare both series, just in case the ratios are different.
Well, that settles it then, Mandalay declared.
You'll use both, starting with this other series. Can you switch between different versions of the same character? Like between the first season version and the third within a 10-minute window?
We haven't tested that yet.
Then, if the weakest is in the first, and we're looking for baseline of the most powerful, then start with the third season,
Mandalay reasoned. Izuku and Miyuki both looked at each other, then nodded. Izuku walked over to the manager, but before the sensors were put on him, he thought about something and asked,
Shouldn't I transform first so they don't accidentally vanish?
After a moment of thought, the woman gave a nod and the greenette singer stepped back, cleared his throat, and sung. Alright, it's MGLN Striker S OP1 that plays, and I'm not gonna butcher it because I don't know this opening. The traditional flash of light occurred, but instead of instantly fading, the area around him turned dark for the duration of the song. The others around him experienced a feeling of shock as this had not happened before. His mother reached out her arm, took one step forward, but stopped before reaching the edge of the darkness. Nothing could be seen for about 2 meters around the transforming team, and when the song ended, the ground had a layer of frost spread out for slightly less than 2 meters. The table and the computer equipment were steaming, as if they had just been taken out of a freezer and brought outside. Looking beyond the frost ring, a teen brunette stood in Izuku's place. Her long hair was tied into twintails, flowing back, tied by white ribbons. She was wearing a predominantly white outfit with mostly blue piping. The main exception seems to be a type of armored corset, which is piped in black, running all the way to the neck and partially covered by a short over jacket with puffed out pauldron sections at the top of her arms. The sleeves ended in blue and black braces, and fingerless gloves. The jacket was held together by a large red bow. While she did wear what appeared to be a white miniskirt, there was an overskirt that was open in front and attached to the waist part of the corset. She had white armored boots with golden buckles and white hose that reached all the way up to the mid-thigh, leaving very little skin showing. Interestingly enough, she was not showing any signs of cold. But what caught most people's attention the most wasn't the clothing, but the item the magical girl was holding. It appeared to be a white, pink, and gold staff with a large red orb at the top, partially encircled by a slim golden arch. There appeared to be a gold magazine, like the kind found in guns, some automatic rifles, sticking out of the staff on the pink mounting cylinder, below the gem on the same side as the opening of the ring surrounding the gem. The opposite side of the mounting appeared to be a golden plate that would slide back and forth.
Okay, here's a question for you, Midoriya-chan. Do you actually have magical cartridges in there? The manager analyst asked, sounding hesitant.
The now brunette girl looked at the orb on the staff as if pondering the question and how to test it before deciding to try something.
Raising Heart. What is your current load of cartridges?
There are currently 6 loaded cartridges in the magazine, and 1 in the chamber, my master. The gem replied, briefly flashing red.
Okay, that's definitely not freaky.
A female voice muttered low, barely audible from the group of adults. The remark was almost drowned out by a loud exclamation of, "Eh?" from Miyuki as she finally looked at her readings.
What the?
What happened? President Might asked, with a great deal of concern in his voice. When the hero turned to look at the equipment, he noticed the steam and asked with alarm,
Is your equipment supposed to do that? All of my systems are in the middle of rebooting. It will be a minute before they can take readings again,
she declared alarmedly.
Why did this happen? And why is everything so cold?
After about a minute's time, she had the equipment ready again and began outfitting Izuku.
We'll have to hurry, since we lost time while my system booted up. I'll determine what happened after you get through with this part. Hi,
was the reply given by the transformed singer.
During this time,
Pixie Bob started getting the requested dirt creatures ready. When everything was set, they had about 5 minutes left, which was barely enough time to get the necessary power readings.
Okay, Izuku. Start with your most powerful attack without using ACS,
the panda woman commanded while typing away at the no longer steaming keyboard.
Okay, let's go. Raising Heart,
the magical girl replied. Yes, my master, the gem replied, flashing as it did so. Then the head of the staff changed forms, with the gem becoming an orb between 2 triangular golden spear points.
And that's not freaky. Not at all,
Mandalay muttered to Pixie Bob, who promptly shushed her. 2 discharges of cartridges could be heard as 2 empty shells hit the ground. Ready to shoot, my master. A pink magical circle sprang to life under the changed girl as pink bands of energy formed both around the head of the staff and the tail. A sphere of pink energy formed in one of those bands, at the tip of the 2-headed spear, and grew to about half of the girl's height.
I'm reading an influx of energy from all around her. The power grid, your battery backups, even the ambient light.
The panda lady absently remarks to the gathered group. The onlooking crowd can only stare on with mounting trepidation. Perhaps they should have stuck to the first season? Indeed, the area around the girl grew dimmer as even the light around her was starting to get absorbed into the sphere. Finally, the girl called out,
Starlight Breaker, shoot!
A massive beam of pink energy burst from the device, easily engulfing the largest of the dirt creatures and passing it into the forest. It passed through several other creatures as if they weren't even there, and continued onward into the forest behind. The earth rumbled beneath them as if a mild earthquake was occurring, even as the beam continued forward until it hit a mountain, whereupon a portion of the mountain exploded.
Quickly, build another one. I want her to try another spell to see if the power drain was just that particular spell or something else,
Miyuki called out. Pixie Bob blinked a few times, gulping while trying to clear her head out of the sheer terror that the power of that attack induced. After a nudge from Eraserhead, she nodded and got to work making more creatures. She was tempted to reinforce these, but remembered at the last second that these were supposed to be baseline tests. Doing so would defeat the purpose. Once that was done, Miyuki called out,
Base only, no cartridges.
Once the creature was created, Izuku once again raised the staff and charged another attack. This time, no cartridges were used, but the areas around her seemed to shimmer slightly. If one weren't looking for it, one would miss it.
Divine Buster, shoot!
The now magical girl aimed the blast, which was much smaller, at the construct, which was blown back in many small pieces. As a few of the creatures behind it, but not all, amidst the backdrop of the rumbling mountain.
Okay, switch to your other form,
The manager called out, manning the time.
we can gawk at the damage later.
Nodding, the girl sung the first couple of lines of the song and the light returned, followed by a very brief blackout near her. Thankfully, she was away from the measuring instruments, allowing the panda lady to see what happened.
I see.
When the darkness faded and the frost returned, the girl was slightly shorter with brown hair going to her waist in the back, but short in the front. She wore a tight-fitting, one-piece, sleeveless black and red dress that ended about mid-thigh, over which was a short sleeveless white overcoat with black edging everywhere but the bottom, where it was blue. Black boots went up to almost mid-calf and revealed white opaque stockings that went up to mid-thigh. Her hands were covered with black gloves with a golden plate on the back. But again, it was the objects in her hands that drew the most attention. Each hand held something that resembled a pistol, but it was very much futuristic looking.
We're running out of time here,
Miyuki called out, startling Pixie Bob to replace the destroyed creatures. Once they were complete, she shouted,
You know the drill, Midoriya-chan.
The teen girl aimed the weapons at the creatures and concentrated. Within seconds, several orbs of energy appeared around her, and the area shimmered again.
Crossfire, shoot!
The orbs shot out at incredible speeds, striking the first creature and tearing it to pieces, but not going beyond it. All but one of the remaining beasts fell the same way, but it was apparent that several orbs were needed to down each beast. When the last beast remained, the teen took aim with both pistols and fired each one more, causing two different kinds of orbs to be shot out, making two holes in it. This occurred just in time as there was another flash of light and the girl was gone, and the green boy was standing in her place. He fell to his knees, then to his hands, and panted for a moment even as the dust began to settle on the mountainside. Tiger, who was watching the mountain, blinked. There's a hole that doesn't go through the mountain, but it definitely formed a cave. Okay, that is not a spell to use on a living person then. Eraserhead spoke as he turned to look at the mountain.
Actually, the Granite panted, every spell I used is considered to be non-lethal, but physically devastating to non-living targets. Most living targets are just rendered unconscious. Can we please not refer to those things as spells?
Said a visibly shaken Mandalay. Oh.
And why on earth would someone need a concussive spell powerful enough to blast a cave into a mountain?
An equally shaken Pixie Bob asked.
Well, he turns into a magical girl, so I wouldn't know what else to call them,
Present Mike added before turning to the Quirk analyst.
What did the readings show? First, his quirk definitely spans across all three types: mutation, transformation, and emitter. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you can't force him back to male with your quirk, can you, Eraserhead?
No. I discovered this during the fight at Kami. I can cut off the power she uses, but I can't undo the transformation. Sorry, problem child. The tired man responded.
Second, The source of the magic is ambient energy around him.
The radio station manager continued.
Electricity, light, heat, power residue from emitter Quirk use. All of it used even on the spells that aren't supposed to use it. It also fuels the transformations, which is why the flash of light normally occurs. This is especially important when he transforms into more powerful forms, like Nanoha. In that case, every bit of nearby energy, not in a living being, and what I believe was a 2-meter radius, went not only into the transformation, but to fuel the cartridges the form's device uses. That's what shut down my equipment. So it's not magic per se, but just a very weird quirk, observed Inko.
Izuku nodded and just said,
I have a strange quirk. I have to learn to live with it. And as for why such powerful spells are needed, well, let's just say some people are more durable than others. All Might would probably laugh off the shots from Tiana's form, he explained while lightly panting, for once too tired to stutter at the moment. Correct. Now for the most important piece of information I was able to glean right now,
Miyuki continued.
For this form, anyway, the amount of power available for him to use in this environment is approximately 2% of what the actual character can use.
What? Was shouted by everyone but President Mike and Izuku.
Yes, you heard me right. Approximately 2% of the power available to the original character. Which makes my previous statement about avoiding the second season all the more important, she said, sternly looking at Izuku. We do not want him to bring forth the artifact from the second season. Far too dangerous, for it was not a controlled artifact. Also, the ACS attacks would likely have destroyed the mountain, if they were able to work at all. As far as I can tell, the limit for power drain is what is available in that 2-meter sphere, but that is still quite substantial. As you can see, especially when he has time to store power in those cartridges during the transformation stage. I noticed that the device I was using was intelligent,
Izuku observed.
We'll have to test that to be sure it is a true artificial intelligence, or if it is a small fragment of your consciousness, but yes. Either way, that means that those characters are likely going to be the quickest when it comes to being able to go from transformation to use, even with the charge time,
the panda woman answered.
Though, I can think of one series that will be even quicker, if what I theorize is true. Since you have the next week off, you can binge it and we can test that theory out.
In the meantime, Tiger smiles as he interjected himself into the conversation. Now we start the physical training. Not all your forms are going to afford you the luxury of being able to stand there and fire your attacks after all. Izuku smiled even though he was groaning on the inside. Tiger could be a hard taskmaster. By the end of the weekend, both teens were exhausted. The theories made on the first day proved accurate so far, but only time would be able to tell how they held true across different series, as Izuku decided to dub them. The title may not be very original, but it was very descriptive. Izuku was assigned some homework from President Mike for the week, given that his school would be closed to effect repairs. He was to spend the hours he was not studying in his school subjects studying at least 1 or 2 magical girl series, noting opening songs, powers, origins, artifacts or weapons, weaknesses, and any factors unique to the magical girl. Notes were not just expected, but required. He was to treat it as a dedicated deduction assignment and be prepared to use them the following weekend. Asui had found a new application of her power too. She'd found she was able to camouflage herself, although this required great concentration. She and Ragdoll spent a great deal of her quirk time working between that and applications for mucus secretions. She also had a research project assigned during the week. She was to research different frog species and see what species had abilities that came closest to her power sets. She was to note down any possible combination of species and note any abilities they had that she did not. When it was time to head to their new home, it was decided that Sue would be dropped off first so the Midoriyas could get her address. Their new address would not be divulged to her for a while, due to the heightened security considerations. For that reason, no mention of where the new house was located was made until after Sue was dropped off at her house. The teens had slept through the trip back, and Izuku got out to help his friend with her packs. After dropping the teen off at her home, the mother and son were taken to a moderate-sized house. It was in a suburb close to the UA campus, and from the outside seemed similar to the homes around it, though there were 2 other cars and a motorcycle parked nearby.
Okay, welcome to your new home,
Yumari said as she, Present Mike, and Eraserhead got out of the van.
Mary-chan,
Iko said nervously.
This place already looks occupied.
Her son shared her nervousness, though after considering the way the dark-haired man strode toward the front door, he was beginning to understand what was happening.
Yes, it was. Up until today. By the 3 of us. Now it's occupied by the 5 of us,
the Lady Pro Hero replied. Before the green-haired mother could say anything, she put up her hand and said,
Even if you were to move into an unoccupied place, you would have at least 1 or 2 live-in heroes. There are also some things we're not telling you, primarily because we don't know them ourselves. But Nezu is rather insistent that you 2 do not live alone. Also, we have room since this house is really too big for the 3 of us as it is. So you aren't being an imposition or putting anyone out. And although Mr. Grumpy Pants will deny it until his dying day, we have grown quite fond of the 2 of you. Shodi only calls kids he likes problem child.
Oh, the single mother said as her hand comes up to her mouth.
If you're quite sure. Yes, we're sure. We don't know how long it will be, but that doesn't matter. Please consider this to be your home. We will have movers move everything in tomorrow. Izuku, sweetie,
the mother called, snapping the boy out of a silent freakout.
This will be our new home.
MidoriyaIzuku.exe has crashed. Rebooting. A few days later, he'd done it. It had taken far longer than he had liked, but he had finally managed to get the girl out of the underground complex on the pretense that her grandfather wanted to see her. On the bright side, that meant that Chisaki Talei of Excuse me, sorry, there's a typo here and I'm trying to figure out how to word it. On the bright side, that meant that Chisaki Talei of carving her up for at least a day to avoid blood showing through the bandages. He'd wished he could have forestalled the man longer, but any time at all was a miracle. It was too bad he couldn't bring a pack of belongings for her, but she didn't have much anyway. The girl was quiet. Too quiet. He only hoped that she'd recover in time, and that there wasn't enough psychological damage done to make her just walk back of her own accord. He knew Chisuke's game, and therefore knew that he'd tell her that any deaths he caused would be on her if she were involved at all. Which meant that if this failed, his death would be used to tighten the noose around her neck. Still, he had to try.
"Where are you taking her?"
A tall, muscular man wearing a bird-like mask covering his entire head asks from the room closest to the front door. "Boss told me to take her to get some fresh air," the lieutenant replies, scratching the back of his head. "He said to go get some ice cream." "Chisuke never told me about that," the Ryuki said, starting to rise. "Not him, the boss," he replied, taking care to emphasize the final word, indicating the girl's grandfather. "Oh," the inquisitive giant replied, blinking a couple of times behind the mask. He looked down at her feet, then walked over and got her some shoes from a cubby, as well as a dress.
"Can't have the public thinking she's not being taken care of."
"Good idea," he said, wondering why they hadn't gotten rid of the dress yet. Still, he wasn't looking a gift horse in the mouth. He took her to a nearby empty room and quickly got her changed, whispering, "Hurry up, no time to waste." The girl only nodded and hurried as fast as she could. Once she was dressed, the lieutenant took her hand and quickly led her out the door and through the gates. He prayed to the kami that his luck would hold, but he knew that he spent too much time already trying to be inconspicuous. This was proven a moment after he had thought that by the sounds of several shouts coming from inside the campground. One voice in particular caused the white-haired girl's hand to tighten in his. "I'm going to pick you up now. We need to run, okay?" At her nod, he did just that, darting into an alleyway in hopes of making himself harder to track. Uraraka Ochako was walking down the streets of this new town, trying to familiarize herself with its layout. Her parents decided to move their business here after suffering yet another setback in her hometown, only to get the opportunity to get more contracts here. The chance to grow their business and work better hours, with more and more importantly, more jobs, made the decision all the wiser for them. After all of their previous employees decided to move with them, so very few people were left behind. Now they may not have been rich, but they weren't poor anymore either. As an added benefit, they were closer to her dream school, UA. So if she passed the entrance exam, she could conceivably live with her parents and commute every day. Therefore, she took some time after school each day to stroll through the streets looking at the various shops. She enjoyed window shopping. Even though she now had money to buy some things, she could never bring herself to spend money frivolously, opting instead to remain frugal and save money where she could. And hey, if it meant that she had money to buy something expensive down the road, then that was great, right? One sec, y'all. She stopped at a sweet shop at the corner of an alleyway and peered inside. They sold mochi in there, and part of her was tempted to go in and get some when she heard the front door jingle as it opened, revealing 2 elementary school children and a teenager. All 3 had frog theme going, with the older 2 resembling human frogs, while the little girl resembled a human tadpole. Make sure the... Oh, excuse me.
Make sure the packages are sealed before you put them in your bags, kiddo. You don't want to make a mess out of your books.
The older girl who looked to be about her age, said. The two younger kids said variations of,
"Hi, sister."
in unison as they checked the bags of treats before putting them in their backpacks they were carrying. The tadpole girl looked excited as she asked,
"Are we going to see Izuku-ni-san today?"
The other young sibling, a boy, tried to look cool but was also plainly excited. The scene made Ochako smile. She was raising her hand to give them a wave when she felt something small slam into her side from the alleyway. It seemed to latch onto her, and it was shaking violently. She looked down to see white hair and a single horn. She was about to say something else when a man who looked rather beat up stumbled out of the alleyway, saw her, and staggered over. "Please, take her. Run. Get a hero. Help." The frog girl turned her attention to the man and asked,
"What's going on, kiddo?"
"Men. Coming. Illegal. X." The man coughed up some blood on her shoes as he clung to her shirt. The gravity girl instinctively pulled the little girl away from the blood while the guy hacked some more, as he let her go over and grabbed the side of the building. "Experiments. Not far behind. Take. Run." Angry shouts and the sounds of quirks being used could be heard down the alleyway, causing the little girl to shake even more violently than before. "Harry!" a voice called out. "Give her back!" The man turned around and fell to the ground on his posterior, then shakily turned so he was on his hands and knees. When his hands made contact with the ground, shockwaves rattled the ground down the alleyway. "Run! Please!"
"Harry, is it?"
Ochako asked the girl. The girl gave a scared, hesitant nod.
"Are bad people chasing you?"
Another nod.
"Do you need help?" "Please, help me."
A small whisper breathed from the girl's lips. Ochako didn't waste any more time. She picked the little girl up in her arms, then turned toward the family of three, who had been watching in varying stages of horror.
"We need to get out of here." "I can lead us to some help, kiddo. But my brother and sister..."
The shouts were getting louder, and the crashes were getting nearer. The man was sending more shockwaves down the alley and urging them to run.
"I can make them lighter if you can carry them,"
Ochako hurriedly said. The girl riveted even as she nodded her head, allowing Ochako to use her quirk on first the little girl, then the boy. The tadpole girl got on the boy's back, and the boy then got on the frog girl's back. The brunette reached down and scooped the unicorn girl in her arms and talked to her as calmly as she could.
"You may feel a lot lighter for a little while. Just hang on to me, okay?"
The girl in her arms nodded, and the two teens started to run away, each carrying a load of weightless children. At the green-haired teen's instructions, the boy reached into her bag and pulled out a cell phone, and proceeded to dial a speed dial. When the other person picked up, she asked,
"Izuku-kun, where are you?"
At the radio station. Why? You sound like you're running. What's..." Just then, several loud screams came from behind them as the pursuers had cleared the alleyway and started to chase them. "What's going on?"
"No time. If you're with President Mike, put me on speaker."
Okay, you're on speaker.
"President Mike Sensei, I have an emergency.
I have several unknown hostile people chasing me, my siblings, and 2 unknown females. 1 my age and 1 approximately Satsuki's age." Excuse me.
They're
Voice crack.
They're killing people indiscriminately, and appear to be after this little girl. I need assistance, kiddo."
Where are you, little listener? The voice hero asked.
About 3 blocks east from the radio station.
Just then, more screams were heard as the ground just behind them crumbled and spikes jetted out of the ground toward them. Ochako jumped, using her quirk on herself and the girl just in the nick of time. The frog girl also jumped, narrowly missing being impaled on a spike.
Someone has a powerful metal rearranging quirk. Okay, Eraserhead and All Might are on their way down. I'm also headed that way. Try to evade and run away as best you can. Don't try to go down any alleys.
Give her back!
A man's voice called out behind them as another wave of crumbled ground and spikes came in their direction. Ochako was grazed in her side by the spikes, but the frog girl wasn't. Still, the graze was enough to send the gravity girl sprawling into the side of a building. Even as she started to get up, she could hear the screams around her as hurt people tried to scramble away. She looked back, seeing a man in a bird mask stalking down the street, with one gloved hand. The damage to the street looked contained at the moment, though, as if he had projected it in a straight line.
Why do you have to be so?
The man started. He didn't get far, though, as a laugh rang through the streets.
Have no fear. I am here,
All Might announced as he landed in between the fleeing girls and the bird masked man. Not a moment later, a man in an all-black bodysuit, long gray scarf, and yellow goggles landed behind them, right next to Ochako.
All Might, the exemplar of the disease infecting the world,
the bird mask hissed.
Eri, this man is going to die. The girls with you are going to die. The only way to stop it is to come with me now. Otherwise, their deaths will be on your hands. Do you want that, Eri?
Do not listen to him, kiddo.
The frog girl spoke up before the frightened little girl could say anything.
What he is doing is called mental abuse. They make you think you are bad, that you caused bad things to happen, when you have nothing to do with them. Abusers always blame the victims, saying it is their fault when it's not. But the tall man is trying to save me. You are all trying to save me.
Excuse me, one sec. The little girl screamed.
All Might is making his own choice. The man who is blaming you is making his choice to hurt others, kiddo. You are not controlling them.
The frog girl walks a little closer even as other heroes and a boy with green hair arrive.
She's right, Eri-chan. You didn't hurt me. He did. He chose to send that spike after me, not you. Did you want him to do that?
As the little girl shakes her head, the gravity girl smiles. It is then she notes the boy is walking over to them. Ochako doesn't know why that boy seems to grab her attention, or the attention of the frog girl, but he does.
I have a friend who was abused by someone he called a friend for a long time. He blamed himself because that friend, and the adults around him, said it was his fault. All because his quirk was weak, kiddo.
The girl's head snapped up at this, looking at the frog girl.
No! Don't you corrupt her!
The man screamed, apparently having run out of patience. He slammed his hand to the ground, but nothing happened.
Eraserhead.
Just then a shot rang out, just barely hitting the strap of the Eraser hero's goggles, causing him to blink and jerk his head to the side. Another man jumped forward and slugged the hobo-looking man. Several people then started to surround Eraserhead while Overhaul tried to run toward Eri, only to be intercepted by All Might. In the meantime, the two girls were being pulled back by Midnight, and the boy with green hair, the Gravity Girl, noticed earlier. The Unicorn Girl was obviously distraught by the fight, still blaming herself. While Eraserhead was slowly making his way through some of the attackers, the older green-haired girl said,
By the way, my name is Asui Sue, but you can call me Sue, both of you.
After receiving a nod from both of them, she said,
As I was saying, my friend was blamed for a lot of things that were in no way his fault, kiddo. He thought his quirk was embarrassing and made him weak.
The boy snapped his head in her direction as he heard her speak, but was silenced with just a pleading look from the frog girl. Ochako had to wonder what that meant.
But his quirk is amazing, kiddo. He can do so many things with it, and it is powerful. Yes, it comes with some problems, but those aren't really problems, are they?
She continued, looking at the boy as if speaking to him.
What does his quirk do?
The little girl asked, sounding scared for some reason.
It can turn me into a girl and give me powers.
The boy spoke up as he knelt down to the little girl.
I'm Midoriya Izuku. Can I ask your name?
His shining green eyes flicked up to the girl holding her, including her in that statement. Just then, the battle between the disassembly and reassembly Quirk user and All Might escaped the confines the pro hero had set momentarily, as a spike shot toward a random wounded woman on the street, who was hobbling toward the safety line. The spike would have impaled her had it not been for Suyu's tongue. The family girl didn't hesitate to snap her tongue out and grab hold of the woman, then yank her as gently as she could away from the spike, causing it to miss. The number one hero destroyed the spike a moment later and rushed in, destroying several spikes that now seemed to grow everywhere on the street in an effort to get the man.
Eri.
Oh, excuse me. Thought it was him talking.
Eri. Urarako Ochako.
The Gravity Mistress replied.
Nice to meet you both,
The boy said with a smile.
I thought quirks were curses. I used to think the same of my quirk,
The boy answered. For some reason, he wasn't stuttering at the moment. Something he would only later remember to wonder about.
But the heroes and Su-chan are my friends, and have shown me different. Can you show me yours?
The little girl asked, sounding for all the world like she needed just that little more proof. After looking back up at and receiving a nod from the woman in a hero costume with him, he nodded.
I can't fight in the battle, but I can show you something with it if you want.
The little girl gave a hesitant nod, and the boy smiled. In the meantime, Eraserhead was down to one man. A man that would have dwarfed Tiger for size that wore a bird face mask. And All Might was slowly making progress to Overhaul as the street became littered with gravel that couldn't be reformed anymore. So the song that plays is Rescue by Lauren Daigle. And this one's in English, so I can say it at least. You are hidden. There's never been a moment you were forgotten. The man facing Eraserhead blinked as he had looked in Izuku's direction just at the right moment to catch the flash head on. Eraserhead capitalized on the mistake to catch his feet in his binding cloth while activating his quirk, allowing the hero to trip the villain into the ruins of the nearby building. In the meantime, Izuku transformed into a woman with rainbow hair and kaleidoscope eyes. Her voice projected an orchestra where there was none, but it sounded like it was in a distance. The unicorn girl was amazed at the sight and sound, while the gravity girl could understand where this quirk could conceivably be embarrassing, but personally found nothing wrong with it. She personally enjoyed the show. I hear you're SOS. You're SOS. I will send out an army to find you. The subtle undercurrents of the song began to tug at the feelings of the little girl in need of rescue, strengthening an ember almost put out by the machinations of a madman. It was just enough to stop her shaking, even as Eraserhead finally knocked out the large man he had been facing. He turned toward the fight between All Might and Overhaul to see the hero wounded, but far from done. At that time, they were engaged in a war of attrition, where the criminal was sending a constant wave of spikes toward the hero while All Might was punching them down constantly. Eraserhead wondered what was taking the number one hero so long, so he decided to loop around to the battle to see. You're not defenseless. I'll be your shelter. I'll be your armor. Eri turned to look at the battle and noticed that the others were following her tormentor were all captured. And the man in the black suit was going to the nearest rooftops to swing around to the other side. She then looked back to the singer in awe, even as Sue's siblings smiled and hummed along with the song. The gravity girl and the frog both seemed to be watching the unicorn girl as if silently saying, ditto. In the meantime, Eraserhead made it to the rooftops to see exactly why All Might didn't just finish this. Behind the criminal was another group of onlookers who were resisting being pushed back by the police. If the blonde hero let off a more powerful punch, the shockwave would likely injure a civilian or worse. Still, something could be done about the stalemate now that Eraserhead was free to act. He moved into a position where he could not be readily noticed by the recombining man and activated his quirk, prepared to hold it for as long as it took. I will never stop marching to reach you. In the middle of the hardest fight, it's true. I will rescue you. Quite suddenly, the stream of spikes was cut off, and it took All Might no time at all to break through. Overhaul was caught off guard and looked around frantically to try to find the source of the disturbance in his quirk, only to be met by the American-themed hero's fist. That was the last thing he would remember for a while as he lost consciousness and fell to the ground. Rather nasty quirk there, All Might said with a low rumble as he held his left side. He turned around and started to make his way to the group of kids, only now recognizing that one of them was singing to another. In the middle of the hardest fight, it's true. I will rescue you. Oh, I will rescue you. Tears started to roll down the white-haired girl's face as she let go of the brown-haired girl to hug the rainbow-colored girl. Said girl returned the hug, silently whispering comforting words into her ear, as she softly cried as well. Sue noticed the approach of both heroes, as Eraserhead had moved to join the number one hero and left her siblings with Midnight to walk to them.
It's probably best to give them a minute, kiddo. I think they both need that.
The kid going to be okay? The tired-sounding man asked, not really specifying which kid he was talking about.
Eri-chan is traumatized and needs help. Izuku-chan, I think, has recognized a kindred soul, and is providing some of that help. It may be a turning point for her, Kero.
The girl answers as she glances back at the pair. Young lady, can I ask you a couple of questions? The taller hero asked.
You just did, Kero.
The hobo-looking hero snorted and walked toward the gaggle of kids to take stock of what was going on there, leaving the pair of them alone for a moment. Haha! First, can I get your name, please? The hero asked, laughing at the joke told with a perfectly straight face.
Asui Suyu, All Might-san.
Second, he started.
Why did you save that civilian from being impaled by that spike? There were other heroes around.
Kettle, she repeated. Yes, there were. But all of them were busy with other problems, and it looked like she would be killed by that spike. I couldn't let someone die right in front of me if there was something I could do about it. But, to be honest, my body just kind of moved on its own the moment I thought of that. And besides, my tongue could move fast enough to move her safely without further injuring her, causing me injury.
I see, the American-themed hero mused. Do you go to the radio station often?
Every weekday. I'm receiving training alongside Izuku-kun for hero school.
Okay then, All Might responded. I need to help with cleanup and the wounded, but I would like to have my assistant Yaki Torshinori talk to you at some point soon. I may be able to help you on your journey to be a hero.
Alright, Kettle.
Whew.
That really was a long chapter. Alright. On to the next one. Alright. For this chapter, there is a trigger warning for victim blaming. So, I just wanted to warn you guys about that. Having said that, we're gonna go ahead and get into the next chapter. Chapter 9, The Home Front. A Quirk News Nightly television broadcast. Quirk News Nightly special report. From within a secure holding cell in an undisclosed location, we bring you this special report. A man in a dark business suit with dark orange hair said from behind an anchor's desk. What you are about to see was recorded earlier as our Director-in-Chief reporter Kizuki Chitose was granted an interview with the famous coach Maeda Ryota, formerly head coach of Aldera Middle School, allegedly charged with multiple counts of child abuse, child neglect, suicide baiting, and promoting juvenile delinquency. Tonight, he will be answering questions about what truly occurred at Aldera Middle School. The scene faded away to reveal a concrete cell with no visible windows and fluorescent lights. Shackled to a metal table sat a large bald man in an orange jumpsuit. His black eyes seemed rather sad, almost regretful as he looked over to a pale, blue-skinned woman with lilac hair with green eyes. The woman wore a navy blue, shoulderless dress, sitting at an angle to the man. Between them on the table was a split microphone, set up, with a microphone for each of them, allowing both to speak without having to move something in between them. So, Maeda-sensei, 2 weeks ago, an entire country stood riveted to their televisions as the Aldera school system was systematically dismantled. Several prominent figures, including Principal Nezu of UA High School, alleged systematic quirkism that rooted itself in the very structure of all 3 schools, which in turn allowed for, quote, horrifying abuse of maltreatment of countless youths at the hands of teachers, staff, and students, end quote. Furthermore, they said they had incontrovertible proof of these allegations in the form of one of the so-called school-sanctioned quirkist enforcers coming forth to provide testimony providing these points. What is your response to these allegations?
For the most part, these allegations are either bold-faced lies or overstatements of individual random events that were swiftly handled by the teachers and staff of the victims. The inmate replied, I myself stopped several such cases when I noticed they were happening, as would any educator who cares for their students. The administration of Aldera prided itself on upholding the honor and ideals of society, including that of excellence and honor. Bullying exemplifies neither. That is true. In fact, today's society practically mandates equality for all, regardless of what kind of quirk someone has, correct? the reporter director supplied. That is indeed correct, the interviewee replied.
Well, I truly hate to be the bearer of bad news today, but through due diligence and investigative journalism, we have discovered the identities of not only one of the chief victims of the charges against you, but of the star witness as well. Unfortunately, we are forbidden to divulge their names over the air, but I have on this piece of paper the two names, each labeled according to their role in the case. I will first ask you for your opinion about the top name, the child who is the chief witness in this case.
The man takes the paper and looks at it, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly before he takes in a deep breath to sigh. It's so sad to see such a brilliant mind fail like this. He has such a wonderful quirk, one that would have been phenomenal for heroics, and now he's throwing his future away to help perpetuate this scheme of persecution and falsehoods against this very school that was helping him rise to the top of the applicant rankings. I have to wonder what he's being offered to throw away his future like this.
What do you mean?
The woman asks, leaning forward to look earnestly at the man. Well, he's caught between a rock and a hard place now, isn't he? The PE coach says with a remorseful look on his face. By virtue of his name appearing on this list, the law can only protect him until the first case goes to court, which will be tomorrow. After that, his name and image will be fair game to broadcast for any reporter who wants to cover the story. So after tomorrow, if he shows up and takes the stand to testify as expected, the truth will come out. The entire nation will know he can be bought, and his chances of becoming a hero will fall to zero. If he takes the stand and tells everything as it actually happened, then the government won't trust him, and the hero schools will blacklist him. Same will occur if he just fails to show. Either way, his chances of becoming a hero have just died.
Is there anything you'd say to him now, if he were here face to face with him?
The former coach nods once and looks directly at the camera as it zooms to capture just his face. It's not too late to do the right thing. Even if you can't be an official hero, you can still be a hero to the people who are even now being unjustly accused of vile crimes against children when you take the stand tomorrow. I believe in you. I know you will do the right thing. As the camera pans back out, Kizuki gives a sympathetic smile to the man and sighs.
And now we turn our attention to the second name on the list. This boy is being lauded as victim 0. According to our sources, his near suicide via vigilantism is what started this case against you and a good many of the hard-working teachers of Aldera. While many of the details remain unavailable until his trials tomorrow, our investigative team has learned that the planned testimony includes suicide baiting, standing aside while letting assault occur, allowing for illegal quirk use to occur, and other rumored activities too horrific to even mention on television. In short, our team has uncovered a goal to paint you and the others at your school as nothing short of monsters. Funny, you don't look too monstrous to me.
The alleged criminal looks at the name again and then shakes his head in regret. Of all the things I regret most as an educator, I truly regret not being able to reach this kid. He is a deeply disturbed child in desperate need of help. Was he bullied? More than likely so. I never personally saw anyone bully him, but he was so withdrawn, so skittish, that there had to be something there. Once upon a time, I even suspected there might have been something going on at home, but any investigations into that came back negative. We never even saw a hint of his quirk appear, which we found odd.
That is odd, the reporter supplied. Nearly every child had some history of quirk usage, even in middle school.
True, the educator agreed, but we never saw or heard anything from him. The only way we knew he had a quirk at all was because there was a single incident in preschool when it manifested. I don't remember the details, but the records indicated he felt really embarrassed about it and recommended he seek therapy.
Did he?
To my knowledge, other than a few trips to a court counselor, no. The man forlornly sighed as he hung his head. I remember bringing up the topic with him a few times, but he always reacted badly to the mere suggestion that he needed help. I even remember once telling him that we could schedule him a follow-up session with his quirk counselor, if he were so afraid of his quirk, and he ran away from me. I never brought it up again.
So, do you think he has some kind of issue that could be prompting his complaint?
The question caused Maida to fall silent for a few moments as his head fell toward his chest. His hands clasped together in front of him, even as he sat there. As the camera zoomed in, one could see a single wet spot materialize on the table. I don't want to speak ill of the kid. Kami knows he has had a hard enough life as it is. His father left at such an early age. His mother works such odd hours, and he has no friends that I'm aware of. He was not the most well-liked kid at school at Aldera, and I don't know if that's changed at his new school. But I think he desperately needs help, and I pray that he gets it, no matter what happens tomorrow. If for no other reason than to help him with his delusions.
Delusions?
The reporter asks, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, delusions, the shackled man answers. You see, I said he never showed what his quirk was, and that was the only way we knew he had one at all, was because it manifested at school when he was in preschool. Well, he wants to be a hero, you see. As in, he nearly worships heroes, particularly All Might. And he thinks he can stand as an equal to All Might. But his quirk, it's just not suited for heroics. All it can do is change his sex. Nothing else. Just change his sex. And even that has a very short time limit. The most it can do is give him some stealth ability, barely. Its other limitations make it pretty useless even for that. Can someone with that kind of a quirk, someone who hasn't trained all their life and doesn't have the kind of body one would expect for that profession, be a hero? I may not be a pro, but I think it would be nearly suicidal for him to try. Especially if he plans to stand on the same level as All Might.
I see. So he'd be a danger not just to himself, but to the very people he'd be looking to rescue, right?
The lady asked somberly. Yeah, was the response given. The woman looked genuinely sad to ask this, but she still soldiered on.
If you could say anything to him right now, what would it be?
I forgive you, was the simple, short answer. The woman gave a wan smile as she turned to face the camera that zoomed in on her face again.
This is Kizuki Chitose with the Quirk News Nightly, thanking you for tuning in to our interview with Coach Maida Ryota, formerly of Aldera Middle School. Back to you, Kinshiro.
Izuku sat there stunned in a near catatonia next to his mother and his soon-to-be adopted sister Eri. Both of them were crying, but they were near polar opposites in how they cried. His mother was wailing. One hand clenched a handkerchief in her lap, while the other hand had a hold of his shirt at his right shoulder. Her head was leaning onto Izuku's shoulder as well, and her voice could be heard throughout the house as she decried how unfair the report was. Eri, on the other hand, was hugging Izuku, her head burrowing into Izuku's left side. Where his mother's tears were flowing like rivers and already threatening to make a stream in the living room. The little girls were more sedate, but were still of sufficient volume to soak his shirt on that side. She was a silent crier, something that if the Greenette singer were capable of rational thought at the moment, he would likely blame her treatment at the hands of an imprisoned Yakuza member for. Izuku's hands were gripping his pants in tight fists, his knuckles nearly bone-wide from the effort. His body was shaking and his eyes were wet. He looked like he was frozen in time, caught between grief and anger, desperately trying to hold back both so as to not worry the others in the room. Of course, this did nothing to alleviate the worries of anyone physically with him at the time. Neither those with him on the couch, nor those watching from other points in the room. 3 other people were in the room. 2 had been there the entire interview, having experienced the entire event with a mounting sense of horror. The woman, known as the R-rated hero Midnight, went on duty, and Kayama Namiri at home, was slowly approaching the trio on the couch, being careful to make sure all 3 knew of her approach. There was compassion in her eyes even as she tried her level best to keep the righteous fury away from the surface. A part of her wanted to go to that television station and tear it down, but she knew she couldn't, so she had to settle for putting out the fire in front of her. One of the 2 men in the room, and the only one to have seen the entire interview, held more than enough obvious fury for everyone. He glared at the television as he slowly grabbed the remote and turned it off. Hisashi, if you're here to tell us supper is ready, you might want to put it at some place to keep it warm. The erasing hero Eraserhead, also known as Aizawa's shouter, growled out. It was one of the rare times his schedule allowed him to eat with his family, and it was obvious he very much did not appreciate having this ruin his night. Yamada Hisashi, also known as the voice hero Present Mai, had only caught the last few minutes of that interview, just enough to know who was being interviewed and to deduce exactly who they were talking about. His mouth was set in a thin line, and it looked clamped shut as if he was afraid to say anything. Everyone in the house knew that Hisashi got really angry. When Hisashi got really angry, he tended to use his quirk, and the house would shake with the reverb if he wasn't careful. Since Eri came to live with him, he tried to be more careful. The blonde man gave a nod and turned to do a suggestion, knowing that this was going to take a while to process. The cook/server didn't get very far before all of the adults in the teens' phones all started to vibrate and announce text alerts at about the same time. They didn't stop for a good 5 minutes afterward, but no one in the house was in a rush to answer. Even Inko's phone, who didn't have too many people who knew her son's story, was fairly busy. Finally, Nimeri was the first to answer as the other girls tried to get their tears under control, and Izuku finally started to let his tears fall in earnest.
Nezu is calling for an all-hands meeting here in 30 minutes, the lady hero finally announced. He's stressing people stagger arrivals and dressing incognito. He wants you there, Inko. Izuku, would you take care of Eri in your room, please?
Eri, for her part, did not look like she was going to let go of Izuku anytime soon. The 2 had traded stories about their childhoods, or lack thereof, over the past 2 weeks, each finding in the other someone who could truly understand the other's pain. It left the both of them closer than most other siblings of similar age differences, and each had a protective streak over the other at least 3 kilometers wide.
Hi. If Hisashi could prepare plates for us, we'll eat in my room.
Izuku's phone was still going, though somewhat more sporadically than before.
And we can answer that while we eat,
he said, looking at his bond sister. She nodded at him with a cheery smile.
Can do, Izuku,
said the blonde man as he had just come in. He turned around and went right back into the kitchen and started making a couple of plates. Good, came the tired man's voice right afterward. Even as the boy turned to look at the darker-haired male hero, he noticed the man got off the couch and was making his way toward him on his knees. Once Shota reached his side, he put one hand around the Greenette singer's knee and looked him in the eyes. Whatever they hope to do by that flaming garbage pile of an interview, I want you to know that none of that is true. It is illogical to think that you are to blame for what happened. You have suffered a lot, and no one could have gone through what you did and hoped to have fared better. Don't listen to them. You will be a great hero, understand?
We'll get through this, Nissan.
The unicorn girl said next to him, with moist eyes.
We're here for you, sweetie,
His mother added. He looked toward Mimuri, who just gave him a wet smile and nodded, which he returned to everyone even as Hisashi came out of the kitchen and headed toward the stairs.
Come on up, little listeners. Time for dinner.
The two children followed the voice hero to Izuku's room and set up a small table for the two to eat at.
Let me see your phone, Izuku-kun.
After getting the phone, he typed a message to the chat before handing it back.
There. That should give you about 15 minutes to eat before they start paging you again. I suggest you make the most of it. What little I saw shows your friends are worried. After that,
Hisashi left the two to eat. Taking that warning to heart, the two ate as quickly but as neatly as they could. Normally, they would not be allowed to eat in their rooms, but emergency situations called for special considerations. They managed to finish with just under a minute to spare, then set the empty plates aside to looked at the chat. Friendship Circle group chat.
Gravity who? Do you think they're done yet? It's been 15 minutes.
Mamo.
I'm sure they'll be on as soon as they can.
Not Sonic. Even if it makes them late, I hope that they took time to properly eat their meals. Full digestion is important for everyone.
Gravity who? I know. I'm just worried as all. Those people.
Idol fan changed their name to Unicorn Idol.
Unicorn Idol. We're here. Aries here with me, by the way. Kero. How are you doing, Izuku? And how are you doing, Eri?
Gravity who?
Tekiru! Thank goodness. How are you feeling?
Not Sonic. I too am concerned about your well-being. You did take time to eat properly, right? Nutrition is very important in stressful times.
Unicorn Idol. I'm a little shaken up, to be honest. Can't really say I'm fine.
Aries says she's concerned about her Nissan. Not Sonic. Of course you're shaken up. Anyone would be in your situation, Midoriya-san. Gravity who?
Aww. Eri, can you give your big brother a hug for me? Please?
Kero.
And another one for me, please.
Unicorn Idol. Keyboard spam. For 2. Hugs received. Thanks.
Kero. I will be having training at the radio station tomorrow, Izuku.
Gravity who? Exclamation points. Momo.
I'll reserve my hug for class tomorrow.
Not Sonic. Radio station? Unicorn Idol.
Great. I thought tomorrow was a scheduled separate training day with your trainer, though.
Gravity who?
So all of us together, then? Yes!
Unicorn Idol.
Momo-san, Ida-san, I know I told you that my trainer is present Mai.
Momo.
Yes, but you didn't say where you trained.
Not Sonic. And you failed to mention that others trained with you.
Kero. Oh.
Gravity who?
Blushing face. Unicorn Idol. Blushing face. Kero Kero. Izuku-kun! Unicorn Idol. Sorry? It's not like I purposely forgot you or anything, it's just that I thought you already had trainers. And that I was asked to keep the training group small. And everyone that is in the group was admitted through one circumstance or another, and... Momo. Well, Sue, you were right. I've never seen anyone mutter over text before. Not Sonic.
Yes, that was something to behold. But do not worry yourself over fear of insulting us, Midoriya-san. I am not insulted. You are right that I do have a trainer of my own, and I do not begrudge you getting a trainer for yourself and those who do not have trainers.
Momo, as I told you before, you're allowed to think of yourself sometimes. Really, we're not insulted.
Gravity who?
See? I told you they wouldn't be. Unicorn Idol. Harry says you ought to have seen what it was like here.
Momo.
That said, we shouldn't spend too much time planning things out tonight here. It's too easy for communication to be intercepted. Midoriya-san, can you ask your trainers if it's alright for you to have a couple of visitors to your training session tomorrow?
Not Sonic. That way, all your friends can be gathered at once to make plans for what to do in case things blow up in our faces, more than they already have.
Private message to Kero Kero. Unicorn Idol. Is All Might going to be there? Kero Kero. As Toshinori, yes. I'll warn him.
Unicorn Idol.
Thanks.
PM to Booming Man. Unicorn Idol.
Is it okay if a couple of friends from school come with us to training tomorrow? We need to discuss what's going on face to face.
Boomin' Man.
That's rockin' on, Izuku. Private message to Kero Kero. Kero Kero. All Might has been warned. We're to say he's All Might's personal trainer.
Unicorn Idol.
Got it. Friendship Circle Group Chat. Gravity who? I hope he gives the all clear. It would be great to finally meet you face to face.
Momo.
I agree. Not Sonic.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree.
Unicorn Idol. Okay, he's given the all clear. Gravity who? Yay! Kero Kero. Pleased Kero. Unicorn Idol. Lol. Kero Kero. Bows. My mission is complete. I made Izuku-kun laugh.
Momo.
I've always wondered why you call yourself Kero Kero. Because modern-day female Kermit is too lone. And this way I can poke fun at my verbal tick.
Unicorn Idol.
She has this very cute verbal tick that makes her ribbit every once in a while. It's one of the chief ways people can tell what she's feeling. And then it's M-O-R-S. I don't know what that means. And then a blushy face. Kero Kero. ... Did you just call me cute, Izuku-kun? Unicorn Idol deletes a previous text. Gravity who? Too late. We already saw it. Kero Kero. She's right. You just called me very cute.
Momo.
Oh my. Oh my.
Not Sonic. I'm afraid it's too late to retract it, Midoriya-san. Not that I can understand why you'd want to retract it anyway. I mean, it is normal to find someone cute. Just look at
Gravity who? Is it just me, or is there a lot of attempts to delete leading to accidental postings tonight?
Momo.
Oh my.
Not Sonic has gone offline.
Gravity who? Well, at least Deku didn't do that immediately.
Kero.
Thank you, Izuku. I think you're cute too.
Unicorn Idol.
Izuku-san dropped his phone and is stuttering. I just got the speech-to-text working. This is Yuri. I need to go now. Night.
Unicorn Idol has left the chat. It had taken a while for Izuku to calm down from being a flustered mess. He couldn't even answer private texts from either of his two female friends at the rest of the night or the next morning. He had no idea how he was going to face Uraraka-san, much less Su-chan, after school that day, as he silently berated himself at breakfast for letting that slip. Eri, the ever-innocent that she was, of course, let it slip at the breakfast table exactly what happened, which garnered a knowing smirk from Yumuri and a theatrical sob from his mother about her baby growing up. Of course, both men looked proud of him, though Shota tended to hide his look of pride behind his capture weapon in an attempt to look tired of the theatrics. No one was buying it. All in all, Izuku was all too happy to leave for school to escape Yumuri's and his mom's over-inquisitive comments about his feelings and his sister's innocent comments about what had made Sue in a relationship to her. Oh, I think that's supposed to say comments that Sue had made in relationship to her. Sometimes he thought the unicorn girl was too mature for her own good, but he was never going to say that to her face. Better that than the alternative, after all. So he left the house in a hurry to escape the teasing, resembling something like a large strawberry. Of course, the good-natured grousing lasted until he got to school to find what seemed like half of the student population talking about the previous night's interview. He supposed he should count himself lucky that not everybody knew where he transferred from, though he heard some people ask if there was a recent transfer from Altera before. Speculation ran rampant, primarily due to the fact this was a private academy, and the number of transfers from a public institution like that was likely to be small, even in the best of times. Although, the conjectures against even one person transferring from Aldera to Kamine didn't seem any more palatable than the ones wondering where the transfer went. He could swear some people from outside of his class recognized him. Beads of sweat started to form on his forehead and on the back of his neck the closer he got to his homeroom. But before he could reach it, he ran, almost literally, into Ida, who appeared to be waiting for him. Iga-sensei wants to see you in conference room 2. He told me to offer the presence of myself, Momo-san, and Kinoko-san as well, since we are the closest to you. He's under the impression we know your story, and we didn't say anything to the contrary. That was unusual for his friend, but Izuku could tell the boy was worried for him, and that made the difference.
No offense, Ida-san, but we're getting together after school to discuss this anyway, right?
At the boy's nod, he said,
This is likely to be a short meeting to decide how to handle the class as a whole. So, while the offer is much appreciated and welcome, I would like to wait until then to discuss this with you.
That's more than fair for Momo and myself, Ida replied with a nod and a handshaw. Though I must ask about Kinoko-san. She isn't coming with us this afternoon, is she?
Izuku sighed and said, Sensei invited her himself, she'll be leaving with us.
Ah, that must be why she was pouting when she got to the classroom. The blue-haired boy reflected. Well, I suggest you get to the conference room quickly then. The sooner you get done, the sooner you can get your scolding done. The green-eyed singer looked somewhat defeated at the reminder and sighed out a defeated hi, before turning and walking to the conference room. True to the teen's conjecture, the meeting was definitely about the interview and the controversy it raised. He was asked directly who knew about the circumstances of his transfer amongst the student body, to which Izuku gave a list of people, including a separate list of those that would know by the end of the day. When questioned about the wisdom of telling the people on the list, he explained those people on the list were his closest friends, already knew where he had come from, and already knew some of his background. So in the end, it would be filling in the gaps more than anything else. The teachers and staff reluctantly agreed, but asked he limit any others knowing as much as possible. That was something he very much agreed to. However, sometimes fate just didn't like to cooperate. The first clue came when the green bean made it to class about 5 minutes before Iga-sensei. Komori was out of her seat the moment he entered and met him at his desk. Even with the hair in front of her eyes, and the warning he got from Ida, the pouch she was sporting was something that he was definitely not ready for.
Hello, Komori-chan,
he said nervously to the obviously upset aspiring idol.
Sorry,
he added quickly, hoping to appease her and hopefully to avoid the scene in the making.
Why?
The mushroom girl bit out. Oh boy, it looked like Ida understated the case. And this apparently caught Todoroki's attention by the way the boy looked at the pair with obvious curiosity.
You're a good friend, and I should have included you in the discussion last night?
Izuku asked, fighting to keep from putting up his arms around his head. While he knew she wouldn't hit him, some reflexes were harder to break. And from the looks of the deepening frown on her face, she noticed it too.
I'm not going to shrooming hit you, Izuku-kun,
his friend exasperatedly commented.
But I am going to tell you how very disappointed I was to get told of a meeting of all your friends after school with your Quirk counselor, of all people. I thought I meant more to you than that. You do. Then why didn't you let me know directly?
Izuku closed his eyes and took a deep breath and let it out slowly in an obvious effort to get a handle on his nerves.
Komori-chan, you were one of my first friends, and definitely the first person to reach out to me here.
He started, making a deliberate effort to not stutter, which was missed by exactly no one.
The truth of the matter is the chat last night was not initiated by me, and I was not exactly in the best headspace after seeing the interview.
Todoroki's eyebrows moved upward by a marginal amount at those words, said barely loud enough for him and his friends to hear as connections were made, and conspiracies became evident.
If it weren't for the fact that I had to read the text for my sister, I didn't know how I would have functioned through that chat at all.
The brunette's face lost some of her anger at his explanation. While she knew that his life before coming to the school had not been pleasant, no one at the school knew the full extent of the hell it actually was. Izuku was not one to talk about it here.
And by the end of it, the others got me to cheer up by teasing me about something I let slip.
He paused here, his embarrassment overcoming his attempts to not stutter.
And I couldn't continue the chat. He's telling you the truth.
Momo spoke up, having come closer to offer silent support until this point.
His sister had to use speech to text to explain before leaving the chat, because he was a mess after confessing he found a girl cute. Speaking of, he wasn't the only one making confessions,
she said in a teasing manner as she looked into her blue-haired friend, with only a small blush on her face. Both boys went bright red and started to stutter at Momo's teasing, causing Komori to turn her attention to Momo.
"Oh, you ruined it!"
she exclaimed before breaking out into a giggle. That giggle was joined in by the tall black-haired girl as she winked at the pouting brunette.
"Later. It's almost time for..."
At that point, Iga-sensei opened the door.
"Everyone to your seats,"
she called out. It took a minute for everyone to get situated before they could bow to the teacher, so he could start roll call and announcements. During this time, Todoroki may not have said anything, but he filed everything away to use later. Later, as it turned out, would come right after school ended for the day. Todoroki missed Izuku at lunch due to the latter's friends taking station around him to ward off questions. But since Izuku's last class of the day was choir, something only Komori shared, he was waiting for him by the time the duo left the choir room. "Excuse me, Midoriya-san. Can I talk to you for a moment, please?" The two friends looked at each other in confusion. Generally, the heterochromatic boy was quiet, standoffish almost to the point of being cold, and hesitant to initiate any conversation not directly related to schoolwork. Only thing was, neither Komori nor Izuku had any school-related projects with Endeavor's son, so there wasn't any reason for the boy to initiate contact. Still, the old saying, "gift horses," seemed to apply here, so after a brief conversation, the greenette nodded first to Komori, then to Todoroki. The other boy waved for Izuku to follow him to a nearby empty classroom, where the quiet boy entered first and waited for the door to be closed before turning to the vocal Quirk user. They stood there for a few minutes staring at each other with an uneasy silence hanging in the air. There wasn't anything really oppressive about it, but it felt weighty as if something of import was about to be asked, and someone didn't know how to ask.
Todoroki-san, I don't know if you heard, but I'm expected somewhere today, and I need to meet my friends soon," the normally nervous boy stuttered out. One sec, y'all. "Are you Present Mike's secret love child?" the withdrawn boy asked. Okay, that was not on the list of things the song-sexual boy anticipated being asked. No! Why do you think that?"
"Well," Todoroki said as he cupped his chin with his thumb and pointer finger, "I've overheard you talking to Yabirozu-san, Ida-san, and Kinoko-san about lessons with him frequently. I also note that you two have voice-related quirks. You have difficulty controlling your quirks to some extent, and while I'm not exactly sure that what yours does beyond the sex change thing announced in class, I can only assume it's fairly destructive form from the damage our classroom took. Your quirk shares those traits with Present Mike, so I was wondering why he was training you and what your training was like." Izuku found it both amazing and rather sad that he could follow the other boy's logic to a certain extent there. So much so that he wondered why the boy wasn't in his quirk analysis class with him at the very least. Maybe it had to do with his tendency to automatically assume secret love child status. He shook his head clean of that thought as he prepared his answer.
"You bring up some surprisingly good comparisons, Todoroki-san, but I'm not related to Present Mike. To be perfectly honest, my sperm donor left us soon after my quirk manifested."
The stuttering teen paused for a moment and sighed before apologizing.
Sorry, I don't speak of him often. He left us in a mess with problems we only just discovered recently.
So you don't like your father either? The boy said matter-of-factly. Now, Midoriya Izuku may not be the most knowledgeable person when it comes to social situations. He may be awkward, fearful, and possess a great deal of trust issues, but he was at least intelligent enough to pick up on the word either at the end of that question. He had a couple of ideas what it could mean, but he simply didn't have tools to dissect what the other boy could possibly mean by that gently. So, he could be forgiven if he simply said, No, not really. What about you? The heterochromatic teen's face contorted into a brief flash of anger that caused the broccoli-headed boy to grow even more concerned. What did you call your father? A sperm donor? Yeah, that seems to fit the man very well. The boy quickly shrugged it off and moved on to ask.
But that's not why I was asking, really. I was looking for a reason for President Mike to be training you.
Oh, excuse me. But that's not why I was asking, really. I was looking for a reason for President Mike to be training you, so I could perhaps get some pointers. You never come to school with more than a couple of light bruises, and while you do occasionally come exhausted, your tiredness never seems to be caused by anything he pushes you to do. Even what little I could get from your discussions with your friends tells me this. How do you recover so fast? The vocal Quirkist would ordinarily be upset at someone eavesdropping on his conversations with his friends, were it not for the fact he had been subtly encouraging the boy to listen in to get him involved. Instead, he counted this as a win. But at the same time, he was developing a clear picture of the other boy's home life, and he was not liking what he was seeing.
I won't say that my training sessions aren't hard. They are. But President Mike Sensei is careful not to run me to the point of collapse. He says that it is actually bad for a person's development.
Now it is Todoroki's turn to blink at an unexpected answer. How does he expect you to be the best if you don't train until you can barely move? This question caused the singer to stand there in open-mouthed shock. Okay, this conversation had turned disturbing on so many levels. It actually took a couple of minutes for the boy to regain his composure, by which time he could hear Momo and Ida in the hallway asking Komori about the whereabouts of their green-haired friend.
Damn, we're out of time,
he murmured. Gathering himself up as best he could, he looked to the teen inside.
Todoroki-san, I know we barely know each other, but I think the best person to answer your questions would be President Mike Sensei. I'm due to bring my friends there now for a meeting concerning everything going on in my life. No one at school knows the full story, but now is the time to let them know. I would like to include you in that group, because I think by understanding my past, you will understand some of my reactions. I really think you need to talk to President Mike. Will you come?
A knock from the door echoed through the room, followed by,
Izuku-kun, everything okay in there? One moment,
he answered before looking at the other boy, who seemed somewhat conflicted. I don't see the point, the boy finally said, and Izuku's heart sank. But it seems that this is important to you, so I will come and listen at the very least. Can I reserve the right to not say anything? Counting the small victory for what it was, Izuku nodded and smiled. He pulled out his phone and started to walk toward the door.
Todoroki's coming with us,
he announced to the group. giving them a smile that didn't reach his eyes and a wave. I'm contacting the adults and letting them know now, so let's go. Yamuri and Inko both blinked at their phone before looking at each other in shock.
I swear the boy has two quirks. One is that singing quirk, and the other is that he attracts trouble like a high-powered electromagnet,
Yamuri said with a sigh.
Can you blame him, though?
Said boy's mother said with a sad expression on her face. The collected heroes, other adults, teens, and children all turned to look at the two mother figures with more than a little concern.
I suppose not,
the surrogate mother said as she read them return reply.
Okay, so here's the deal. Izuku is bringing Todoroki Shoto to this meeting. For reasons I can't say at this time, we need to tread lightly here. I'll forward what details I got to the prevalent parties, but all I can tell you is that, as a group, is that something else has come up to complicate matters.
Soon after, each of the heroes' phones started to chime their text message alerts, soon followed by Tsu's and Ochako's. The latter two read what was sent and blinked, looked at each other, then sighed. They each individually knew parts of their friend's past, as they somehow had come to earn the boy's trust far quicker than anyone else could possibly have done otherwise. So the single line of text was enough to give them an idea of what their friend had suspected. As Momo's driver had picked them up, it wasn't long before the group from Kamine Junior High made it to the radio station. The front desk had expected everyone, including Todoroki, thanks to a last-minute call by President Mike, who was already down there to meet them. The voice hero took one look at Izuku and frowned.
I can already guess by the look on your face what your day was like, pre-stage performer,
the man said as he came up to hug the green teen.
It wasn't great, no,
the boy muttered into the hug. The heterochromatic guest finally took a closer look at the boy he sought advice from, and then remembered all the questions and looks the boy had received during the day.
He's been hounded most of the shrooming day,
Komori muttered, earning a glance from the adult for the intended language.
Sorry, just we had to play interference most of the day from people asking him about the happenings of Altera. Fortunately, only a few remembered where he used to go to. So those were few and easily recognizable.
The man nodded and said,
Come on, let's get you all upstairs where we can relax, eh?
He said, trying to sound positive for his might-as-well-be son's sake.
Just do me and everyone else a favor,
he said, looking to the group as he ushered everyone into the elevator.
Don't name names up there.
The doors closed before Mike said,
We'll have a hard enough time keeping Shota from throwing a chair through the window. We don't need him going down to your school and scaring some poor middle school students near to death for being overly curious. Please?
Even if one or two actually deserve it? Izuku asked plaintively. Gasps were heard all around the elevator, save from Todoroki and the adult. Before anyone could say anything, the door opened and the hero ushered everyone out, but just far enough so no one would be trapped when the door closed again. Everyone in the room turned to look at them, and thus they were witness to the blonde man getting down on one knee to look Izuku in the eyes.
Izuku,
the man said softly, raising alarm bells and a few onlookers.
Were the ones you were thinking of more than merely curious? Really? When you think back on it now.
The boy resolutely did not cry. He instead frowned and clenched his fists at his sides as he gave a single silent nod. There was a mix of reactions in the room ranging from concern to muted outrage. The last being the man dressed in black with a gray scarf. The man hid his face in a said scarf so as to not trigger the boy further. Before anyone could say anything more, two girls suddenly materialized by the upset boy's sides. Neither one touched him yet, but it was obvious both wanted to. Just a half second later, they were joined by a smaller unicorn girl who had no such restraint.
It'll be okay, Izuku-san,
She said. Ochako and Sue settled for placing their hands on his shoulders, after telegraphing they were doing so to give him time to react.
I'm sorry,
he said quietly as he hugged the little girl. The other idol fan turned to the heterochromatic teen and said,
I noticed you were watching him closely today. Did you see what happened to make him upset?
Said teen looked over to the hero that brought them up meaningfully, then back to her and nodded. The mushroom girl took the hint for what it was and nodded. She then turned and walked over to the voice hero and tapped him on the shoulder. Once she got his attention, she whispered something to him, causing him to smile and whisper thanks before running over to his music player to find the song. Luckily, his player was connected to the stations, so it was easy to find.
Izuku-kun,
the mushroom girl said gently, before waiting as long as it took for him to look at her.
You've cheered us up before. Now it's our turn. Please listen.
She was obviously a little nervous, but she needed to do something for her friend. The song that plays is Bad Day by Down Road Powder. I don't know the song, so I'll be saying the lyrics. Where's the moment we needed the most? At first, none of the students save Izuku recognized the song. Of everyone else, Eri and Inko were the ones who recognized it right off the bat. Both smiled at the song and looked first toward each other, ironically, then toward their upset family member and gave their most loving smiles toward him. Komori, for her part, simply stood there as if holding a microphone at the moment, looking into her friend's eyes. You stand in the line just to hit a new low. Oh, I do know the song. At this point, some of the other adults, other than Hisashi who brought up the music for the song, recognized the song and nodded along with it. Inko and Hisashi started to hum along with the music, easily managing to keep in tune. Eri gave her brother a squeeze before disengaging from the hug to go over to stand by the singing teen. She didn't sing yet, but it was clear she would soon enough. Even All Might, who was standing in the background in his skeleton form, started to hum along with the bass tunes. Todoroki, on the other hand, just looked confused. Not only did he not know the song, but the entire concept of what was happening here was utterly foreign to him. 'Cause you had a bad day, you're taking one down, you sing a sad song just to turn it around. At this point, Eri joins in, surprisingly keeping in time with the teenage aspiring idol, despite being newly freed from captivity herself. Komori, who had guessed her intent, had gotten down on a knee and held the air mic between them so they could look at the boy they were serenading as they sung into it. The two teen girls that were holding on to the song sexual enveloped him into a hug and continued to hum with the chorus as if they weren't aware of what they were doing. Inko found the scene adorable and wished she had recorded it. Little did she know that Yamuri had signaled Miyuki to strategically activate a few of the room's cameras and mics to pick up the show. If they really wanted to, they could get signed releases later. Todoroki found himself swaying to the simple beat a little. A part of him resonated with the song, even if he still couldn't understand just what was going on. Alright, I don't remember the melody for this part, so I'll just say it. Sometimes the system goes on the blink, and the whole thing turns out wrong. You might not make it back, and you know that you could be. Well, that's strong. Todoroki blinked when the mushroom girl sung those words to his desk neighbor. Even though he knew it was for the other boy, those words seemed to resonate in him for some reason. It's not like the song was anything special, or like there was any quirk involved, but this song seemed to speak to him on a level that he had never considered. He had always considered music a frivolous pastime for people with nothing better to do. He considered the current performer to be misguided at best in the past. And as far as the boy he had asked for advice from, well, he considered it a part of his quirk, nothing more. But now, he thought he may have to give music another consideration. After all, it looked like it was cheering up the obviously upset boy the song was meant for. You had a bad day, you see what you like, and how does it feel? One more time, you had a bad day, had a bad day. As the chorus bled off to a series of had a bad day, the little girl rushed over to join the other two girls in a hug. Todoroki wandered over to Komori and was joined by Ida and Momo. I don't get it.
Get what, Todoroki-kun?
The heiress asked as she gave the singer a one-armed hug of congratulations. What is everyone's relationships here? That seemed like a safe enough topic to start off at. Well, then again, maybe not, given the way the three teens not involved in the hug glanced at each other. Ida cleared his throat and pointed first to the brown-haired girl in the group hug, then to the green-haired girl. Unacknowledged romantic interest, semi-acknowledged but not really acknowledged yet romantic interest, he said with a blush on his face. Momo motioned toward the little girl with the horn and the silver hair and said,
Adorable, soon-to-be officially adopted sister, rescued from the Yakuza. Don't ask, long story.
Ida picked up again and said, We're not exactly sure about the adults. We haven't officially met them yet. And Midoriya-san is purposely vague. All we know is that President Mike is his quirk counselor and trainer for the UA entrance exam. Mr. Toshinori back there is doing the same for Asui-san. And Eraserhead-san is working with Uraraka-san for the UA exam, though she's getting tips from her on her quirk from Midoriya-san as part of his training in quirk analysis. Tiger is here because he oversees weekend training camps every other week for all of them.
And the woman with long green hair is Midoriya-san's mother, I believe. At least she fits Midoriya-kun's description of her, Momo added.
Some of the pro heroes look closer than that, the half-hot, half-cold user said.
That may be,
the mushroom quirk user remarked with a shrug.
But that's all the information we have so far. We're supposed to learn more today.
Just then, President Mike broke apart from the huddle of people around Izuku and walked over to Todoroki. Little listener, Izuku-kun tells me you have some questions for me. Would you like to ask them now, in front of these listeners, or now elsewhere, or later elsewhere? Todoroki looked at the assembled group for a moment, then back towards the others. This was a big step, he knew, but tonight's event showed him what a family could be, and something inside of him hurt for it. At the same time, he was uncertain if he wanted to share it in front of quite so many people. Finally, he decided to start small and see where things would take him. For the moment, can I ask you about training? We can start there and see how it goes. The quirk counselor and UA professor nodded in understanding. Sure, Todoroki-san. What would you like to know?
Whew.
Alright. I need a quick second to, clear my throat. This is the longest I've ever recorded. Just a second, I'll be right back. All right. One sec. Chapter 10, Trials and Resolutions. Now, warning. There are trigger warnings for this chapter of mentions of depression, witness testimony of abuse, and a brief emotional breakdown of a character. Excuse me, I'm hiccuping a bit. So, if any of these are triggering for you, please do whatever is necessary for yourself to keep yourself safe, whether that be skipping this chapter or having someone nearby to discuss with you and talk out anything. But with all that said, let's go ahead and get into the chapter.
As a few of you already know, and some may have guessed, Midoriya Izuku will not be in class for the rest of the week,
Ika-sensei announced to the class on an unnecessarily bright Wednesday morning. Komori knew she'd miss her best friend at school. She was nervous for him because the next few days were by no means going to be easy for him, not only because he'd have to recount the history of his days at the hands of the Aldera school system, but also due to having to listen to the half-truths and lies the lawyers of the defendants would paint. In many ways, she hated court cases because of this. At best, the defense always seemed to try to push the blame elsewhere. At its worst, some lawyers resorted to painting the victims as the ones deserving the blame. Those were the worst, and she had a sinking feeling, after Monday's news broadcast, that those were the types of lawyers that would be used for this defense.
the faculty and staff here at Cumming Junior High have been debating for the past week many questions concerning the disappearance of your classmate. Some have advocated simply noting the absence and moving on. Others have advocated a full disclosure of the reason for his absence prior to the event and a full assembly of the school, as a means to kickstart several awareness campaigns. In the end, and after consulting with Midoriya-san and his mother, we came up with a compromise between both of those approaches.
The teacher said as she moved out from behind the desk and strode to the door. After opening it, she moved to stand in front of the desk as a television was rolled in by members of the AV club. As the members set it up, the teacher's face grew solemn.
Midoriya-kun, Midoriya Izuku has been called to court to testify in the case of the people versus the Aldera school system. As some of you may remember, he transferred here about 3 weeks ago. A week later, this class was attacked by Coach Maeda Ryota, who somehow learned that Midoriya-san had transferred here. That transfer was supposed to have been a secret to avoid just that sort of attack. That attack is the sole reason that this class, and only this class, is not only learning of the reason behind Midoriya-san's absence, but will also be allowed to see the court case against the ex-coach. In the words of Midoriya-san, "There are students in my class who have been scarred by that attack. They deserve to know why. You can ask his friends. He would not want you to know this otherwise."
Komori found herself nodding along with Momo, Ida, and surprisingly enough, Todoroki.
"What happened to him there has made him a shy and introverted person,"
She spoke up.
"We didn't even know some of the details until just recently."
As an AV club member handed him the remote, and then started to walk out with the other club member, Ika-sensei nodded once to acknowledge the brunette's comment.
"This is being shown to you as part of your healing process. If any of you can't watch this for whatever reason, simply stand up and head to the door. I will issue you a hall pass to the library for the rest of the morning, and your afternoon classes will continue as normal. For those staying, you will not be having any of your classes today, and lunch will be here. If the trial ends early, we will use the rest of the day for a group therapy session to process what you saw. No one got up to leave. Izuku sat in the audience section of the courtroom between his mother and Shota. He and Yamiri were the only heroes of the household to be here today, owing primarily to two factors. First, they were involved in the arrest of today's defendant. Second, Hizashi had to stay at UA to handle Shota's class. Yamiri was sitting on the other side of his mother from him, holding her hand. He was actually thankful for that because his mother looked even more anxious than he felt. There was a small crowd of people in the audience section, mostly media reporters with camera phones. Back behind the group on raised platforms were a bank of raised daisies, where television cameras were set up. There was no way this trial was not being aired. The doors behind him opened, but Izuku didn't pay much attention to it at first. He was more looking at his right hand, which was grasping his mother's left as she gave it yet another squeeze. He knew she was trying to reassure him as a means to try to reassure herself, but he dearly wished she would focus more on herself at the moment. Her anxiety was feeding his and making it harder for him to get his under control. He heard small footsteps come to a stop on the opposite side of Mimuri's from him, followed by a high-pitched male voice asking,
"How are you feeling this morning, Midoriya-san?"
Oh. Izuku recognized that voice. His head snapped up from looking at his mother's hand to find Principal Nesu standing next to his teacher, with his hands clasped behind his back. The Chimera was looking at him inquisitively, with his head tilted to the side, indicating a certain level of curiosity. I'm nervous, sir," the greenhead answered truthfully. It didn't occur to him to answer differently. "Quite understandable," the principal said as he moved to the row right in front of him, which incidentally was right in front of the partition to the court area proper. Before making his way to the empty seat in front of him, standing on the seat, he turned to his back to the mostly empty court chamber and said, "I heard you gave permission for your class to see the court proceedings today." Izuku's face flushed even as he nodded slightly. Yes, sir," he replied. They were traumatized by the attack. They deserve to know why they were targeted." "And what about your right to privacy, the creature asked in counterpoint. "That's why it's only my class, sir. The school originally asked for an assembly." The mother's lips pursed at that, causing him to look at her and mutter, "Which I would never have agreed to." "I see. So instead of proclaiming it had nothing to do with any of them, you limited it to only those most directly affected, right?" The mouse bear thing ruminated. "Well, that just goes to show the kind of heroic spirit that you possess. Hopefully they'll learn a thing or two from this." Izuku was saved from saying more by a door inside the courtroom proper, opening to admit two men in expensive-looking suits, followed by a man in prison attire, followed by two more uniformed police officers. Izuku's eyes widened as he saw Maida-sensei in the flesh for the first time in a week. The last time he had seen the man, it was while the grown man was trying to kill him. As the group of 5 neared the defendant's table, the prisoner's eyes met Izuku's. And if looks could kill, then he would have succeeded in doing there what he failed to do a week prior. Still, the teen tried not to react to the glare. He was not the one in the orange jumpsuit, after all. Asui Suyu and Uraraka Ochako, please report to the faculty office.
The principal's secretary's voice announced over the intercom. The two girls looked at each other from across the room with perplexed expressions, even as their teacher briefly looked at his tablet. After confirming something, she said, "The flipping there is really tripping me up. I don't know which they are anymore."
Take your bags, girls. You won't be returning today.
Sue blinked once, even as she stood up and grabbed her bag. This was all she really needed today. She was worried about her green-haired friend, as he was supposed to be testifying in court. She and Uraraka-chan were supposed to meet up at lunch to call him to see how things were going, but if they were being called to the office to leave for the day, then it would be anyone's guess if they would be able to make that call. She really didn't want to break her promise to her friend. As the two girls made their way to the office, the frog girl turned to the gravelly girl and asked,
Do you have any idea what this could be about, kiddo?
Her female friend also wore a puzzled and somewhat worried expression on her face as she answered.
No, I don't. I don't remember doing anything bad to warrant being sent home. I mean, we did ask if we could watch the trial remotely, but they refused that.
Sue was gratified that her friend had their mutual friend on her mind as well.
Well, we better hurry then. And maybe we can sort whatever it is out in time for lunch. If we're to be out the rest of the day, maybe we can go to the courthouse and be there in person?
She let out a soft ribbit in hope for that outcome, which her friend seemed to wholeheartedly share. They were not kept waiting when they knocked upon the door to the faculty office, though for once she was glad that most people found her facial expressions quite hard to read. Really, other than her family, the only people that seemed to be able to read her emotions on a regular basis were Izuku and Uraraka. What that said about them in particular, given how dense both could be at times, she was uncertain, but she found it quite satisfying. It caused her chest to become pleasantly warm when she thought about them being able to read past the natural stoicism that came with her quirk. Really? Wait. Why was she thinking about that when All Might was in the faculty office in his deflated form? Why was he here? Ah, just the girls I was looking for, the number one hero announced in his normal voice. I trust the paperwork is in order. The question was directed toward their vice principal, who had a few sheets of paper in his hands. Once the man gave an affirmative nod, the effectively disguised symbol of peace walked toward the duo of teen girls and said, "Come, let's be off then." The man led them to his car, made sure they were secured in their seats, then started the car up.
Yagi-sensei,
The hero successor called from the front passenger seat.
where are we going, kiddo? Why did you pull us out of class?
The skeletal man glanced at the two girls and smiled softly. Young Midoriya is going to testify today, as you well know, the man started. What you don't know is that they are trying the case in front of lay judges. Sue paled slightly and blinked at this revelation, while both could hear a gasp coming from the back seat. As you know, that format is used for the more serious cases, and it gives the panel a lot more leeway. But as you also well know, that will put young Midoriya under a great deal more stress than we originally expected.
That's understating things a little. Deku is going to be a mess by the end of the day.
Uraraka said, newfound stress causing her to slip into her old accent.
By more than just a little, kiddo.
Sue added.
If it were just the prosecution and defense attorneys asking questions, he'd be okay. But 9 judges with full investigative powers? That is going to be bad.
She added, shuddering ever so slightly. She felt a hand, minus a pinky, rest on her shoulder from the back seat, which seemed oddly soothing to her. Indeed. I got the text a half hour ago from Aizawa.
And fortunately, I was able to get a hold of each of your parents by phone to get recorded permissions to pull you out of school. We're on our way to the courthouse, though we won't be able to enter the courtroom until they call a recess. Security is very tight at the moment.
Both girls nodded in response to that revelation, with Ochako saying,
Whatever he needs, we'll provide.
They made good time to the courthouse, because not long afterwards, Omai pulled into the Heroes Only parking space. This caused the Gravity Girl a bit of concern, which was addressed by the hero first.
Relax, young Uraraka.
Relax, young Uraraka. I qualify to park here, though I rarely have the need to do so. Speaking of, he gave his protege a questioning look, to which the girl responded with a nod. We will likely be escorted to a private waiting room, since I will likely be called as a witness. This is something you should know, since you are so closely involved with young Midoriya, young Asui, and young Asui.
Are you sure, Keto?
The green-haired girl asked as soon as they were led into the room that the disguised hero mentioned they would be utilizing. Her friend looked between the two of them with an increasingly confused look, the silent question of what was happening plain on her face. Things moved along, did they not? The adult man asked. The night before, after the questions about training,
He needs just one more push.
Izuku Midoriya thought to himself as Todoroki finished the last of his questions. He could tell the boy had something to say, something that would cement his reasons for not liking Endeavor, but the bicolored boy obviously could not bring himself to say it. In that moment, he knew what needed to be done. It would be painful, but it would fall in line with why everyone was gathered here originally, and hopefully. Todoroki-san, please listen to what I'm about to say, and just remember you're not alone. Taking a deep breath, Izuku began to give a somewhat comprehensive explanation of his past to the collected group. He told them about his quirk as it stood when he was in preschool, outlined the incident of its awakening and what the counselors and medical professionals said, and covered some of the highlights of the abuse he suffered at Altera. He knew this would come out at the trial the next day, and knew that his friends needed to hear this from him. He didn't want to lose his friends, but once they found out just what kind of loser he was, he knew they'd leave him. But friendships based on a lie could not support him through what was to come. So, with a heavy heart, he continued with his story, going through the day of his breakdown, including the story of his quirk's evolution, and the feelings of wanting to end it all. By the end of the story, the heroes in the room looked rather grim, having either lived through it or heard a lot of it before. His mom, of course, was crying. Numeri looked like she wanted to hug him, but for some reason she was holding herself back as she looked at the other adults in the room. The troubled teen could tell Sue got her difficulty with facial expressions from her parents, but the hung face and tears in the woman's eyes said everything. Achoko's parents were much easier to read, but what he saw there surprised him. Out of all the people in the room, he figured that it would be the adult Urarakas who would be the least understanding, simply because they didn't know anyone else there. They were the newest adults to the growing group of people, and as such, Izuku really didn't trust them to be in his corner. But in hindsight, he supposed he should have based their reaction off of their daughter's personality, because in the next moment, he felt himself enveloped in a fierce hug even as his vision was obscured by brown hair. The body that was holding him was shaking and he could hear soft sobbing in his ear.
They were wrong. Those bullies, that Bakugo, they were all wrong. I told you before, you're not useless. That's why I call you Dekiru. Please, don't leave us.
A moment later, another pair of arms enveloped both teens, and his shirt was getting ripped from yet another spot.
A series of soft, worried ribbits could be heard on the opposite side of his head from where Chaku's head was. She didn't say much of anything, but he already knew where she stood. He lowered his head into their shoulders and cried, shuddering under the care both girls were showing. What surprised him most was the presence of a hand on his back, one that he hadn't felt before. It wasn't Ida's. That one he'd recognized instantly. This one was too tentative, and felt a little cool to the touch. No wonder, a soft voice said. Todoroki's voice sounded oddly hollow, but at the same time it sounded like he reached some kind of personal revelation. Something told me you'd understand. Hearing those words, he could feel the girls let him go, albeit with great reluctance, so he could turn to look at the bicolored boy. Hi. I understand better than anyone here what it's like to feel trapped and hopeless. These people helped me. I know the details of our circumstances differ, but they can help you too.
Uraraka-chan,
The frog girl began, looking at her.
things have moved very fast, as they tend to do around Izuku-kun.
The brunette nodded in agreement, though she looked very confused.
I could tell by your response to his story last night that your feelings towards Izuku-kun have developed into a very close friendship. Closer than most would expect, given the time you have known him. No, that's not...
The other girl started, but for some reason she stopped as she looked at her friend.
I knew you were Deku's best friend, Sue. I don't want you to think I'm trying to interfere with that. I do like him, and a part of me is very protective of him. But you became close to him first, so you don't have to feel threatened by me. I don't feel threatened by you, kiddo.
The first girl answered succinctly, causing the newest girl to blink in surprise.
But don't take that in the way it probably sounds. I have my reasons for not feeling threatened, some of which are personal, which I'm not ready to share yet. But there is one reason that I have, that I can share because it was addressed last night. Do you remember when everyone explained to Todoroki-kun their family ties?
The confused girl nodded her head before tilting it to the side and blinking.
Yes? Izuku-kun lives in a house with an established, consensual polygamous triangle in the form of Aizawa-san, Yamada-san, and Kayama-san. There stands a positive set of role models for him to base what healthy relationships are supposed to be like. While they're not exactly a normal relationship, and the majority of marriages are still one man, one woman marriages, even in today's society, the relationship still isn't abnormal or unhealthy, just different. Can we agree on that? Yes, though I don't understand what that has to do with my friendship toward Deku.
She replied, even as All Might appeared to be wondering the same thing.
I'm about to get to that, so please bear with me for a little longer, kiddo. One more fact needs to be pointed out. I don't know if you've noticed, but Izuku's mom and Kayama-san have been sharing intimate moments with one another. They don't seem to be sexually attracted to each other, but there's an increased bit of intimacy there. Izuku-kun has pointed that out to me himself, kiddo,
She said, looking toward All Might. The hero appeared thoughtful for a moment before nodding, even as he took a seat, as if trying to figure out where she was going with this.
And I don't know if anyone has noticed, but the other two don't seem to object.
Indeed, the hero in the room interjected. If anything, I noticed Yamada-san looks a bit smug when he saw evidence of this increased affection.
It would not surprise me if the bonds between Midoriya-san and Kayama-san become permanent, such as a queer platonic type of relationship.
The frog girl confirmed to the hero.
Now, the reason I bring this up is because we already know that Izuku-kun is never going to have a quote, normal, unquote, relationship. romantically or platonically. We can already see that with his friendships with Kinoko-san, and to a certain extent, his bond with Eri-chan. Now I know there's nothing romantic going on between Tekiro and Kinoko-san.
Ochako protested.
You're right, there isn't. Those two will likely be best friends and hero partners for the rest of their lives, kiddo.
Sue responded.
But what I'm trying to say is that no one, not you, me, or anyone else, should feel threatened by how close any of us are to Izuku-kun. Izuku-kun has been basically without the basic human need of close bonds with others for so long. People around him are instinctively reaching out to him. Komori-san, Ida-san, and Yadirozu-san are quickly becoming close friends, but still somewhat detached. You and I are closer, with Todoroki-san still trying to find a place to belong. I would not be surprised if he winds up as close to Izuku-kun as we are, based off of a mutual need basis. Eri-chan has moved to a near instant sister status, which means family, which she shares with his mother, Yamada-san, Aizawa-san, and Kaima-san. As I said earlier, I don't think it's possible for Izuku-kun to have what others would consider a normal relationship with anyone. Kiddo?
Some of his other teachers, perhaps. All Might interjected, surprising them both.
Possible, but the protectiveness he inspires in his teachers goes beyond what most students can achieve.
The frog girl answered.
Anyways, I would not even bring this up now, if it weren't necessary. You see, there's a secret that he and I share because we're so close. And as you are getting that close to not only him, but I'm feeling you are.
For once, words seemed to falter in Sue's mind. She doesn't quite know how to put the next part. Finally, she takes a deep breath and says,
I don't know how you feel about me, but I'm feeling like you and I are getting just as close as Izuku-kun and I are.
Ochako's blush marks darkened significantly and spread throughout her face, spilling over into her neck. Both her hands went up to her face, and she started to float up in the air even as she tried to hide her face. But she didn't get very far before Sue grabbed hold of her ankle and pulled her down gently, hand over her hand until she had the floating girl by her shoulders.
No one knows what this is yet, other than a close friendship, kiddo. But we're about to go into a courtroom and support Izuku-kun, as he once again relives some of the most painful parts of his life. We are doing this for much the same reasons, at least you and me. But Yagi-san is also going in there to provide testimony. However, because of certain limitations, he has to make preparations that can be made easier by bringing you into the secret I mentioned before. If you weren't getting so close to the both of us, we'd work something else out, but you are quickly entering Izuku-kun's inner circle, so to speak. So that makes a difference.
While this is still embarrassing to her, Sue's words started to make a certain amount of sense to the floating girl. Therefore, after a moment of deliberation, she pressed her hands together and released her quirk before her stomach became too upset, and nodded to her friend.
Okay, what is it?
With the preamble talks done, the skeletal man cleared his throat and then puffed up with a puff of smoke, revealing the shape of All Might.
I am here.
Of course, this transformation garnered the usual reaction he sees in others as they become aware of his transformed state. Still, he didn't hold the buff form long, just long enough for the brunette to calm down before he returned to his normal form.
About 6 years ago, I was injured in a fight with a villain. This was kept away from public knowledge, but the injuries were severe enough to cause my health to decline. I can hold my hero form for about 3 or 4 hours a day now, but the rest of the time I look like this. Please, keep this between you, young Asui, and young Uraraka. If this were to become public knowledge...
Villains would likely pour out of the woodwork to take you down.
Ochako finished for him.
I understand,
She said with a sigh.
I take it you were planning to help run interference to keep prying eyes away from him?
The frog girl nodded, which caused the brunette to sigh and point out.
You could have just asked me for help, you know. You didn't have to tell me the secret or point out our social dynamic. I didn't want to cause any problems for Deku or you. Relationships can do that.
The green-haired girl softly riveted in exasperation, then shook her head.
I swear, you're just about as oblivious as Izuku-kun, kiddo. Feelings only get in the way of goals when you let them. You can use them to motivate you to perform better. For example, when I'm training and feel like I just want to stop, I think about what would happen to Izuku-kun or my loved ones if I wasn't strong enough to protect them. That gives me the will and determination to push myself harder. Besides, with what Izuku-kun has been through, he needs all the support, mental and emotional, he can get. Kiddo. We're only just entering our teenage years, but I'm not one to ignore something so obvious. Blame my bluntness for that.
Ochako couldn't help but to giggle when her friend explained her reasoning.
Yeah, I get it. Better to be clear now and avoid as many hurt feelings as possible. So what? Are we waiting here until lunch then? How will we know when that is?
Just then, a soft knock on the door echoed in the small room, followed by its opening to reveal Midnight in her hero costume.
We have about 50 minutes for a recess for lunch. They just finished with Bakugo's questioning, and we'll start with the Izuku-kuns after the break. We're all meeting with Nezu in a conference room to eat and go over strategies, and I've been sent to get you. So, coming?
The R-rated hero explained. The three looked between each other and then motioned for the visiting hero to lead the way. In a classroom halfway across the town, the judge announced a 50-minute lunch break and the class watched in silence as the ethics coach was led out of the courtroom. Over the past few hours, the students and teacher had watched as one child their age almost single-handedly dismantled the interview they had all seen the 2 nights before. At first, there were quiet murmurs throughout the class, with the exception of 4 students, who had been allowed to sit together. But as the morning wore on the classroom, grew more and more quiet. Finally, the teacher muted the television, sent a text on his phone, and looked around the room.
While we wait for the food, does anyone need a bathroom break?
A few hands went up, and as the man called them forward, one student appeared to have a different reason to raise his hand.
Iga-sensei, aren't we going to discuss what we just heard?
Yes, was the succinct reply.
But I want us to discuss it only after everyone has the opportunity to go to the bathroom, and the food and drinks arrive. That way it will just be us in here. While we can't prevent the servers from finding out what happened, there's no sense in giving them more information than what's being shown on national television.
The student seemed mollified by the answer as he stood up and accepted the hall pass for the bathroom. It wasn't long before trays of sandwiches, side dishes, and drinks were brought in. Those with bentos were allowed to collect them, and the second wave of those needing to use the facilities were sent out. After everyone had taken care of bodily needs, the principal of Kamino stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. The 2 professionals nodded to one another, with the principal deferring to the teacher.
Now, does anyone have any comments about what we just witnessed?
I do, a black and orange-haired young man said after he was chosen. I noticed that while there were some parts that shocked everyone in this room, for the most part, anything related to Midoriya-san specifically failed to get a response from his friends. By the lack of reaction, can I infer you had heard it all from him? The 4 looked to each other for a moment, as if deciding who should speak. Finally, Momo stood up and said,
Not specifically, no. but we heard a lot of that in broad terms. As Midoriya-kun gave us all an overview of his life before coming here last night. He mostly wanted to prepare us for what we'd hear today, and I wouldn't say that we didn't respond at all, more like we're too shroomed to show what we're really feeling.
Komori finished for her.
Well, Bakugo was his main bully. He wasn't the only one. I have a feeling there will be stuff that will be even worse when he takes stands after lunch.
You four are his closest friends, correct? The principal asked. Hi, Sensei, the brunette boy asked. If you think you need to speak to someone not directly linked to the case, for whatever reason, please let me or one of the staff know. Thank you, Sensei, Todoroki replied, though his expression was as carefully neutral as before. We'll keep that in mind. The other three nodded, while the rest of the room looked upon the four with confusion, wondering since when did Todoroki join any group, much less Midoriya's, and when did the teachers find out? Another student stood up and asked, Sensei, how could things get that bad? I just don't understand. The principal and the teacher looked between each other as if having a silent discussion about who would answer the question. With a sigh, the principal leaned upon the desk and said, Do not make the mistake of thinking the entire world is like the school here. Here, the teaching staff and the administration take special care to make sure your learning environment is as safe and as prejudice-free as possible. The real world, unfortunately, has pockets of people who don't hold those values. What you're seeing in this trial today is what happens when Quirkism, sexism, and transphobia become entrenched into an institution. It is sad, and especially painful for the survivors.
One thing we want you to take from this today,
Iga-sensei noted.
Nomori-sensei said survivors, not victims. There's an important distinction that you need to realize, especially when Midoriya-san comes back to class next week. The word victim implies a weakness, a vulnerability, and even a certain sense of blame, depending on the person observing from the outside. As several people start to protest, Iga holds both of his hands up and says, Yes, I know. We have told you all that victims of crimes are not to blame, and the same holds for bullying. But I'm sure you've heard someone say, well, of course he was picked on, he was a pansy, or she should have been tougher and not let them get to her. Those are two examples of blaming the victim or of bullying for being bullied.
The room became a sea of quiet murmurs as people digested those words. It was as if they did not realize such simple, innocuous phrases could imply so much. And that's why those who suffer being bullied should rightly be called survivors, because even if it was just verbal or internet shaming, their sense of self-worth and self-esteem took damage. How much is hard to say, as it varies from person to person. The teacher said, Now, Midoriya has given permission for you to watch the trial as a class in hopes to mitigate some of the questions that you will have when he returns. Asking questions such as what really happened can often be very intrusive because it makes them relive what they've been through. That's what you're about to see today. I ask you to watch this with an open mind. If at any time this gets to be too much for you, feel free to get up and walk out the door. We will have counselors out in the hallway during afternoon classes along with some of our teaching staff, the principal added. They will be there to help you should you need it, for any reason. No one will judge you if you need help, so please do not hesitate if you think you need it.
Just how bad do you anticipate it to be?
Another classmate asked.
I mean, we were all attacked and all. And I get that It's one reason Midoriya is allowing us to see this trial, but... I mean, he looks like he's okay now. Dad. Momo spoke as she stood up and walked to the front of the room to stand beside the principal. We know a bit more about his life than anyone else in this room, with the possible exception of Namori-sensei. And I won't say what I know, just that what will be shown today is going to be bad.
Momo's face looked calm, but her eyes were moist with unshed tears. This was not missed by anyone.
He did ask me to relay a request. He doesn't want pity. Pity for a survivor of abuse often induces feelings of shame. What he wants is for you to understand. He wants you to learn and appreciate what you have here. His life in this school has been heaven compared to where he was. He wants you all to realize just how blessed you are, so that when you go out into the world, you will work that much harder to make it better for those who find themselves unable to help themselves.
There weren't any other questions at that point. One sec, y'all. Need to clear my throat. Alright. Izuku was glad for the appearance of Sue and Uraraka at lunch, though he still felt a little uneasy around Yagi-san. Things were getting better between them, and he was happy that the man was taking an interest in his froggy friend. But emotional wounds still took time to heal, even ones that shouldn't have been so bad. Still, at least he knew that the man was in his corner, which was a good thing. If there was any one word that could sum up his feelings about his role in the court case this afternoon, it would be terrified. He wasn't one to call attention to himself normally, despite his counselor suggesting that his aversion to attention could be something learned instead of something innate. He couldn't help but to think of the worst possible scenario that could come from him drawing the eyes of the others onto him. Why would others hate him? They would certainly pity him, wouldn't they? He supposed that his friends were proving those fears wrong, but it was hard to let them go. On one hand, he could see that what his therapist was saying. He wanted to be a hero, so that he could be an example to others like him. He wanted to show those with... Excuse me, lost my place. One sec, y'all. Oh, that's why I was looking at the wrong one. He wanted to show those with no hope that there was a way out. He wanted to be that way out for them, to be the person to extend a hand to those who felt abandoned, afraid, and alone. He had decided it this early on when Nemuri and Nezu walked into his life. He knew there was a need for a symbol for those forgotten by the rest of the world, those lost in the pockets of anachronistic thinking as he was. Sorry, y'all. Having to reply to something. There was a need for the symbol of hope, and he wanted to be that symbol. This was one of the reasons he jumped at the chance to help Todoroki when the boy approached him. He could see, without even knowing the details, that the boy was trapped in a world where no one would listen. The boy lived in a world of outdated morals, where power was everything, and right and wrong fell second place to ambition. The boy who approached him fell through the cracks, and the greenette felt a hunger, an almost physical need to help the half-white, half-red-haired boy. That there was something else, something undefined and undeterminable, that also urged him on was of little issue. That boy needed help, and Izuku was going to give it, regardless of the day he had. This was also the main reason he had let his class watch the trial. He knew full well he was opening himself up to possible pity, but if he could impress on even one person in that classroom the need for others to stand up for those who couldn't do so for themselves, then all the pity and pain would be worth it. Besides, he had friends in the class he trusted to help him if and when he needed it. Komori was his best friend. Besides, the two girls behind and to either side of him.
YouTube Music is a music
Oh.
app. And with Music Premium, it's a portal to download songs and listen anytime.
That's the
you
first app. Sorry about that, y'all. Oh. Sorry, that did not go where I needed it to. Let's pull up this playlist. Sorry, y'all. One sec. That works. Hopefully that doesn't get me copyrighted. Alright, where was I? Oh, yeah. Wait, where did that come from? Never mind. He knew that Yayorozu-san and Ida-san would also help him, and the three of them would stand with him to help Todoroki should he need it. Speaking of which, he needed to think of a way to keep him out of Endeavor's clutches. That would be tough. He was jarred from his thoughts by two hands softly squeezing his shoulders.
The Duchess just came back in, Deku. You were muttering again. Thank you, Uraraka-san, he said softly as he stood up. The lead judge called for everyone to sit back down, and it was only then, as the man was directing the prosecution to call their next witness, that he heard her say, "Call me Ochako." He really didn't have time to do more than blush before he heard his name called out. The two girls reached forward and gave him another squeeze before he stood up and made his way to the witness box. After being sworn in, the prosecution began asking him some questions. First, they went over the origins of his quirk, what the quirk counselor did, what the doctor did, and what recommendations were given. He was then asked what happened with those recommendations. He had just started to explain that when the defense objected. I don't see what this has to do with the case against Maida-san. The prosecution lawyer was ready for this, as he explained. All of this information is found in the files the school system kept for each child whose quirk manifested at school, readily available for each teacher. Not only is it available, but they are encouraged to read it, so any particular special needs can be noted. Maida-san is alleged to be one of the worst offenders, therefore we must assume he read the file. One of the lay judges spoke to Maida directly at this point. Is it true that teachers are heavily encouraged to read those files? Yes, Your Honor, the coach replied. And did you follow that directive for your students? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor. Given the answer to those questions, the court will stipulate that Coach Maida read Midoriya Izuku's file, the lead judge proclaimed. Furthermore, this court case is a base case for other cases against the entire school system. So, even if certain parts of the witness testimony may not apply to Maida-san directly,
The testimony sets a precedence for this witness to be called again, prosecutor added. After a moment of consideration, the lead judge nodded. The objection is overruled. Continue, Midoriya-san. Izuku took a deep breath and outlined what had happened when his quirk was discovered, and the staff's reaction. He also outlined what happened when he returned to school, and the teacher's reactions to the students. Once the question was finished, the prosecution briefly touched upon the years between elementary school and middle school, mainly to set a pattern before asking specific questions about his time in class under the coach. Izuku found this difficult to say, primarily because the coach had been one of the more active faculty when it came to his abuse. While the man never hit him directly, the faculty member had on many occasions coached bullies on exactly how to strike him for the greatest effect. He had also been the most ardent about punishing the greenette the 2 times the boy had tried to fight back. He held back the tears as much as he could, but his mother's genes, being what they were, still had them falling. Your Honors, I request a 10-minute recess to allow the witness time to collect himself. His testimony is obviously making him emotional, the prosecutor said, his voice loud and assertive, but also kind. We'll take a 10-minute break, the lead judge said. Young man, if you have someone here to lean on, I will entertain a motion to have them beside you when we resume. That said, the judges left the room. The defendant looked like he wanted to say something, but he was quickly quieted by his lawyer, and presumably reminded that such a comment would look very bad for him. Izuku shakily got off of his seat and made his way to the prosecution's desk before he was surrounded by 4 females, 2 adults and 2 children, all of whom were hugging him tightly. After a few moments, the Midoriyas got themselves under control in time for Namiri to ask,
Do you want one of us up there with you, Izuku-kun?
He sniffed but did not pull back as he considered the question.
Mom, as much as I would love to have you to be up there, I don't think you'll be able to keep calm enough to avoid crying, and that will set me off again.
Unbeknownst to him, the main prosecuting attorney had approached the group and was listening in. Izuku then looked at the other adult woman with a pleading look in her eyes.
Namiri-san, would your position as a witness be called into question if you stood up there with me?
If I could offer my legal opinion, the attorney spoke up from behind them, causing the 2 teen girls to jump slightly. If you were considering just the people here in this group, Midnight-san is the person I would recommend. Nothing against the teen girls, but the court won't entertain the thought of them being with you. They don't have the experience. If you were right about your mother, then she would not be guided either, and any damage to her credibility as a pro-hero would be negligible at best, given that you didn't meet her until your quirk awakening. If that even comes up, she has collaborating testimony from Principal Nezu to back any testimony she could give.
There you have it, Izuku-kun,
the R-rated hero said. She reached around Inko and gave the woman a one-armed hug before saying to her,
You'd be up there if you could.
After getting the woman's agreeing nod, she turned back to the witness and said,
If you need me, I'm there. But you knew that already.
Izuku gave her a watery smile and nod before shifting around to his 2 friends to return their hugs.
Thank you so much. Please continue to support me from the seats. Of course, kiddo,
the frog girl replied as she gave him one more firm squeeze.
Anytime, Deku. I mean that.
The gravity girl added with a firm squeeze of her own. The plan decided, the 2 girls and the boy's mother returned to the audience. He hazarded a glance over to Eraserhead and Present Mike, who at the moment appeared to be shooting death glares in the back of the ex-coach. Once they noticed him looking their way, however, they gave him thumbs up and looks of support.
This helped him relax a bit as he returned to the stand just in time for the judges to return. Do you have a motion to lay before the court, Midoriya-san? The lead judge asked.
Yes, Your Honor. I request the pro hero Midnight to help me testify as my emotional support.
Does the prosecution or the defense have any objections? The judge then asked the court. None, Your Honor, the prosecution said. The defense lawyer was talking to the defendant when he was called. It looked like the two were having an argument. Finally, the lawyer made a downward motion with his hand and stood up, saying, Your Honor, Midnight-san is on the list of prosecution witnesses. We feel performing this service may affect her testimony. Your Honor, we have collaborating witnesses for her testimony as outlined by our witness list. There should not be any issues involving a conflict of interest. The witnesses list is noted as described. Objection overruled. Bailiff. The court calls the R-rated hero Midnight to the stand, the chief bailiff announced. As she approached and was sworn in for her future testimony and given instructions to not lead the current witness, she took her position at Izuku's side. The prosecution then asked the Greenette questions about his quirk, what it was at the time of these incidents, how much he used it, and when, and what he did to try to evade the bullying, as well as any results from attempted evasions. Izuku answered each question truthfully, stating his status at that time as being just a quirk that changed his gender, and that he didn't use it at all if he could help it. He described the 2 times he did wind up accidentally using it, including the second time where it happened as he tried to get away from the gem. It wasn't as if he could avoid gem altogether most times. However, when he had slipped from humming to singing on his way to gym by accident, he decided to give it a try. Unfortunately, he had learned that the staff of the school had been informed to look for any girl who did not belong, and one of the teachers had caught him. He then described how the coach used a game of dodgeball with him as the sole target. Half of the balls the kids threw at him were charged with the coach's quirk. This made them hit weaker than what the coach could do, but much stronger than any individual student's strikes. However, that was the point, as it avoided broken bones. No, it just hurt a lot. Midoriya started to cry as he relayed this incident, and if it weren't for Midnight rubbing his back, he would have lost control again. As it was, casual observers could feel the temperature drop in the room, even as a blanket of oppressive pressure could be felt right over the defendant's table. Midoriya-san, are you alright to continue? The lead judge asked, concern etched in his voice.
Yes,
the boy said with a sniff. The hero next to him produced a handkerchief for him to blow his nose on. In relation to your quirk evolution, when was this? The prosecutor asked once he got the go-ahead.
The Friday before my quirk evolution,
was the answer given. There was a strangled gasp from the audience. His mother, 2 low groans of anger, the girls, and an even further increase in pressure, with a decrease in temperature centered at the defendant's table. Izuku found himself gratified at their responses, but did not want to be in Maida's shoes at that moment. So is it safe to say you had just healed from your injuries before the events of that day? At Izuku's nod, he asked, were there any altercations either witnessed by Maida-san or perpetuated by Maida-san the day of your quirk evolution?
No more than the standard verbal abuse of my being useless, worthless, weak, and hopeless,
Izuku replied. Okay, for the sake of completion, please recount the events occurring on the day of your quirk evolution, including what you noticed going on with your quirk, the prosecutor said. Izuku then went on to describe,
from his point of view, the events of the day. His homeroom teacher was noted as being the subject of a later trial, and the effects his quirk had on others was not divulged, as he did not notice them at the time. Once he was done relaying the events of the day, ended with a talk about Izuku moving schools, being under the Foundation for Battered Pride scholarship, and convincing him to seek counseling. The judges started to ask questions about the quirk before the defense could. All Might was the first called by the judges themselves, who testified about their rooftop conversation. Izuku's transformation into cellular mercury, and then the effects on the later song. Inko was then called to give her impression of the effects of the song she witnessed him singing, which was further described by Midnight. Principal Nezu not only gave his collaborative statement to Midnight's testimony, but also produced a report taken from people in the apartment complex, interviewed after by other heroes. Of course, the defense got a chance to cross-examine the questions the judges asked but declined. Once this testimony was taken, the lead judge looked at the defense attorney and asked, "Do you have any questions for the current witness?" "Yes, Your Honor," the defendant asked, looking a little green around the gills. "Midori-kun, is that Wednesday truly the first day you manifested those powers?" "Yes," the bewildered teen asked, unsure of where the lawyer was going with this. Nezu from his spot by the prosecuting team just smiled. "Really? I find that hard to believe. You suggest you went 9 years with a quirk that just barely changed your sex, providing no powers whatsoever, and just spontaneously manifested a quirk so powerful it literally froze a villain solid, brought a pro hero to his knees, and, on top of everything else, drove an entire apartment complex to a state of depression?" That's what happened," Izuku answered, barely holding himself together. "I would remind you that there is a law against perjury, Midori-san. What you describe is impossible," the attorney sneered. "I have scientific journals that state so-called quirk evolutions are, to a person, hoaxes perpetrated, more often than not, to attract attention." "Objection, Your Honors," the prosecution called. "On what grounds?" "Right of discovery for scientific research. Unless called upon by yourselves, the defense must give notice of producing any scientific documentation," the lead prosecution attorney stated. While you are correct that Japanese law does give us the right to call evidence, even scientific evidence, into court, it is up to the court to judge veracity, relevance, and potential right of discovery violations based on that merit. For the moment, your objection is overruled. However, the defense is ordered to produce these articles to us now, as well as a list of titles and authors in bibliography format, the lead judge ordered. "Yes, Your Honor," the defense attorney responded, handing a stack of papers to the bailiff. "Excuse me, Your Honor," a squeaky voice echoed. "If I may." "The court recognizes Nezu, principal of UA," the lead judge said. "If it pleases the court, I am current with the latest research on quirk theory. I would offer my services to look over the bibliography and help narrow down your reading." The judges covered their microphones for a moment as they discussed the offer. "We recognize Nezu's expertise in the area, given the requirements of being a principal of at UA. Bailiff," the lead judge says. The lead defense attorney looked like he swallowed a whole lemon, but didn't dare object. The need to understand quirk theory for his job, and more specifically, Nezu's intelligence, was too well known to question. Nezu accepted the list, looked over it, then scowled. "Your Honor, these articles are all between 10 and 20 years old. Every single one has been debunked as having been funded by a criminal named Destro. If you wish, I can point out 3 articles which outline the major flaws in all of these articles." The judge asked, "How are these articles in circulation then?"
They're used in academic circles as advanced examples of what to look for when evaluating whether or not a source is good for quoting. As such, they are available academically, the principal said. Provide us the list, and we'll take a 20-minute recess to go over the materials presented, the judge replied. After the judges had left, Midnight pulled Izuku into a hug and whispered that she was proud of how well he was holding together. Coming Junior High. The classroom was far from silent. There were silent people, yes, but others were openly sobbing as they processed what they heard from Izuku's mouth. 4 people were silent, with the blue-haired boy looking resolutely at the table. His hands were clenched into fists, shaking with a myriad of intense emotions. Komori's desk was covered in dark mushrooms, and the girl had a frown on her face even as tears rolled down it. She was doing her best to keep her quirk from going any further. It was a very near thing. Momo was openly crying, but her tears were silent as her hand was over her mouth. Every so often she would generate tissues for someone, or herself to allow people to blow their nose or to dab at tears. She, at least, kept herself busy as class president, helping those students remaining process their emotions. Todoroki outwardly looked like he was a statue. His eyes were fixated on the screen with its court and recess screen. His body wasn't shaking. He wasn't crying. There wasn't anything showing outwardly, except random patches of frost on his right side, and very faint wisps of smoke on his left. But one had to be very perceptive to witness either, so no one could be forgiven in thinking that there was no outward evidence to the maelstrom raging inside. The young man thought over everything that happened the night before, the story that Midoriya had told, and compared it to the testimony given in court. He realized that the boy had been understating his problems, just like he himself had been doing. And while Shoto could not hope to save himself without help from someone else, he found himself wanting to save his would-be savior. He realized that helping his friend would be a tall order, given all the problems Izuku had, but he found himself agreeing with his friend's reason for becoming a hero, to help those who could not help themselves. Neither one could free themselves alone, but together, maybe they could finally break free. As he made that commitment, he finally turned his head to look at his fellow students. He noticed that the class of 20, 5 had left at some point, and another girl was sobbing, as she was making her way to the door even now. He held a debate within himself for about 3 seconds, before he stood up and walked to her, trying to keep himself as non-threatening as possible. "Here, let me help you," he said softly as he reached to help support her to the door the teacher was holding open for them. Shoto just looked up at him and nodded once, a single tear falling down the burn scar on his left side. Finally trailing down the burn scar on his left side, excuse me. It only took the judges 15 minutes to reach their decision, but they took the entire 20. Everyone resumed their places before the courtroom was called into order, and the judge looked at the defense attorney. "The court finds the literature you propose to use as evidence invalid and lacking in scientific merit. Therefore, it will not entertain any defense based upon the literature you provided. Furthermore, while the witness may choose to answer the question put to him, it will be with the explicit understanding he will do so as a layman with no knowledge of scientific research into quirk evolution, unless he wishes to state otherwise. If he does, he will provide a list of articles he has reviewed." Your Honor, my new junior high school has 2 classes I am currently enrolled in. Quirk studies and dedicated deduction. In fact, the school I attend is a private academy I earned my place in due to my abilities in quirk analysis, which is what the first course covers. The second course covers that and other topics, but in a more investigative manner, the witness explains. Again, the judges confer for a moment before reaching a consensus. Okay, so we will take your answer as an informed answer, but not as an expert answer. Thank you, Your Honor, Izuku replied. To answer the question, from what has been explained to me by the doctors recently, and by my new Quirk counselor, President Mike Sensei, yes, it was a Quirk evolution. The defense attorney looked down at his stack of papers for a moment and then sighed. No further questions. After Izuku was excused from the witness bench, he was escorted back to the audience area where several people quietly greeted him. It quickly became evident that the wind had been taken out of the defense's sails, as witness testimony left no doubt the events in question happened. An hour later, another recess was called for deliberation. That lasted a half hour.
All rise. The court is hereby in session, the bailiff announced.
The defendant will rise, the lead judge announced. It is by a unanimous vote that the court finds you guilty of 20 charges of child abuse, 35 charges of child endangerment, 15 charges of Quirk discrimination, and 1 charge of incitement of juvenile delinquency. This court sentences you to a total of 60 years in prison without eligibility for parole. This case is closed. Izuku was a mix of emotions, but he had a smile on his face, even as he sagged into his mother's embrace. I'm free. Alright. Holy cow. I am so thankful that the judges were on his side. I was so worried with the way that it built it up that it was going to be them, like, it being against Izuku in that, and, like, that the defense would be able to walk all over him. But, oh my goodness, the fact that they tried to present that evidence by Destro, of all people, that was funded by Destro. Holy cow. Like, what? Are you stupid? But, I just loved the chapters. My voice is a wreck right now from doing this for... How long has this video been? Oh, wow, 3.5 hours. But I want to thank you guys so much for hanging out with me and sticking around for the full episode, as well as getting the channel to 200 subscribers. We've gone up over 40 subscribers in the last month, and it's crazy to think about. Like, I love doing these podfics because, like, I love these stories and I want to be able to share them with you. And yeah, like, getting to see all the support and talking to you guys in the comments, it really does mean a lot to me. With that being said, I'm definitely gonna go get a drink and use the restroom. But I really hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you guys in my next episode. Ciao for now.